Came out now.
Yeah. Okay, good evening, folks. It is 6:01 p.m. This is the regular business meeting of the Smithfield Township Board of Supervisors. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Members present include myself, Chair Jacob Pride, Vice Chair Robert Lovenheim, Supervisor Michael Albert, Engineer John Tressler, Administrative Coordinator Diana Salvi, Township Manager Julia Heilica, Solicitor Ron Karasak is excused for the evening. We had a standing executive session this evening from 5:40 p.m. to approximately 5:57 p.m. regarding personnel. There was also one on October 2nd from 6:02 p.m. to 6:03 p.m. regarding collective bargaining agreement negotiations with Teamsters 773. And just a reminder that our trunk or treat and fall fest is going to be on Saturday from 1 to 4. So if you still want to sign up, there's plenty of room to talk to Diana about that. Hope everybody can make that, should be good. Okay. Next, our first order of consideration is the September 10th, 2024 minutes and the September 24th, 2024 minutes. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Albert, second by Mr. Levenheim. Questions? All in favor? Aye. Bills and obligations. As we did not have our last meeting on the 8th, we have to ratify those bills, so we have $262,054.86 between the general fund and liquid fuels fund from last time. And then today we have $123,730.12 from the general fund, liquid fuels fund, escrow fund, fire tax fund, and EMS fund. Grand total is $385,784.98. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the bills.
Motion by Mr. Levenheim. Do I hear a second?
I will second.
Second, Mr. Albert. Questions?
Quick question.
Sure.
What's your payroll schedule, weekly or bi-weekly?
Bi-weekly.
Thank you.
Okay.
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We'll proceed to reports. As Ron is excused, there's no solicitor's report this evening, therefore we'll proceed to the engineer's report. John?
Thank you, Jacob. We've been pretty busy. Major projects that we've been working on include Green Mountain Drive Bridge. That's continuing to move forward. Plans are almost ready for submission to the DEP for GP 11, which we need. We've also submitted the type, size, and location plans required by PennDOT for the repair, and they're under review there right now. Missy's continuing to work on the master plan for the bike park and those activities. I attended a Zoom meeting the past couple of weeks with the developer on Franklin Hill Road, and the purpose of the meeting was to discuss the realignment of Franklin Hill Road. There's been a little activity on Green Light Go. We finally got all the pieces. They're not put in yet.
I was gonna say, it's not operational yet, is
It's
it?
not operational yet, but at least we got the hardware.
Okay.
And
Do we have any ETA?
I think within the next 3 or 4 weeks, we should be in pretty good
That will be
shape.
operational, just testing.
Just testing.
Is that both 209s or just 209
Just this one.
Seven Bridge?
Yes, Seven Bridge.
Okay.
And just today, we had a meeting here at the township with township forces on Vision Loss Trail. That project is ready to move forward. Township forces are going to participate in that.
Township what?
Forces, Public Works Department.
Oh,
Just speak a little louder,
I'm sorry.
a little louder.
The last thing I said was that we had a meeting today at the township regarding the Vision Loss Trail project. And Township Public Works Department is going to be doing the work on that project. That's all I have unless there's any questions.
Does that mean, I have one question, does that, I know there was that. The contract that had been signed around these statues, and there's several meetings ago, a question about paying the last one, but agreed that he wasn't gonna be paid until they were installed, so is that's still the case then, Julia?
Yes.
Okay, but this means the project's gonna be able to move forward fairly quickly, or?
Yeah, I mean, we've got to work around the public works schedule. We're coming into winter. They've got a fall leaf schedule, but we're working up a game plan right now so that they can do it in phases. First phase is designed to provide access so that the statues can be installed as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Julia. You wanna know?
One quick thing, just a reminder that leaf pickup is going to start on October 28th. And that'll go through Sunday, December 1st. Please make sure that all of your leaves are out no later than December 1st. And I did have one question, actually. Did we jump the minutes approval for the 24th?
We did both.
You did them both?
Yeah.
Okay. Apologies, thank you. That's all.
Julia, I couldn't quite hear what you were referring to, the time frame.
For leaf pickup?
Oh, leaf pickup, got it. I didn't hear the leaf pickup.
Apologies.
Thank you.
So,
No, we were, thank you.
Cool. And for the Environmental Advisory Council report, I don't see Pat.
Right, was the chair last month,
Oh, cool.
last meeting.
Your friends, I think, EAC, we've been working, getting our perspective together and our general focus together. We're a few things working on, land acquisition priorities and criteria guideline, which we'll share with you guys.
Can you speak up a little for the?
Yes.
people there?
EAC, your friends here, we're just new and getting our stuff together. One of the few things working on is the land acquisition priorities and criteria guideline, which we'll share with you with all the other groups. Focusing on lands the township might consider whenever acquiring or for conservation or recreation. So we'll do our work and come with a specific document, what we would recommend, and share it with you when the time comes and there's money available to do that. Another thing we're working on is an outreach campaign targeting township landowners to encourage community feedback regarding environmental concerns, plus educate residents about the township's new ordinances, i.e. lighting, sound, and private property water management and protection, which is a key focus of the EAC. That'll be an ongoing thing. Water is there's certain areas that will need gradual education of the landowners so that they can take care of their turkey mounds, whatever problem. I think most landowners don't really know how to manage a turkey mound. Typically, it goes unattended, which creates issues with the local water. And finally, we're promoting the idea of constructing some specific pedestrian bike paths, which I think I mentioned around the township. So we can encourage biking and walking. One of them was from Billwater Gap up to Shawnee. And another one might be the music from the Gateway up Music Center Drive to Franklin Road. And the third one might be from the East Stroudsburg Elementary School along Franklin Road. Those three areas could generate a fair amount of pedestrian and bicycle. All right, that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Yes, good evening. Tara Mazzanotti, your liaison to PennDOT and JDOT. A few reports for tonight. First, regarding 611, we had our most exciting report just last week. And I want you to know that you are represented well by Congressman Cartwright, who has chaired and hosted these meetings. Representative Brown, Brown's office is always there, and she's still representative to me, Senator Brown and Representative Probst is always there, as well as, Commissioner Director, John Christie. So they're always there present, they're speaking on the behalf of everybody, but specifically, we did get word that, November 4th is the target date to open. It was widely publicized, so I'm just gonna mention that. And when that does open again, there will be a section there will be a light on both ends. So there's a hot topic right now regarding what, if anything, can be done regarding the width limit that exists today for the trucks. So it's not a weight limit, it's a width limit. So right now there is a width limit, there has been a width limit, and there's signs according to standards instructing trucks that exceed this limit not to enter that area. So they're working on just what to do to maybe help that not happen as much as it does. It's gonna be just exacerbated by the fact that we have the light and it's that much more narrow. So that's real. So that's gonna be coming up and that's gonna be in place. I did get it. It is confirmed. It will be in place very likely 4+ years.
Tara, maybe what we need is one of those, a big version of what you put your suitcase in at the airport to see if it fits overhead.
4 years, right?
That's wild.
Yes.
12 years.
Yes, and so I'll speak, I need to speak to that. I did, I've been aware of this and I've been dripping it out that it very likely will be. But it was confirmed, the fact that Federal Highway has committed to do a full environmental impact statement for the retaining wall rehab project. And while that's going on, they're going to address the slope at the same time. So this whole current crisis started with the rock wall issue. So know that slope stuff and the retaining wall will be done at the same time. So it's a full environmental impact statement. It's required by law that happens for a multitude of reasons, that there's not a thing we can do about it, whether we like regulation or don't is irrelevant. So that will take all of 2 years. When that is done, they will come out with a recommended preferred alternative that is somewhat agreed upon or it goes to court. When that happens, then they move into what is final design in that phase. And that will take a good 2 years, 1 to 2 years for final design. So then let's take it the next worst step. We haven't started construction at my 4-year timeline. So I'm always gonna be real. I'm always gonna share what we know because it's my husband's industry. So then you're looking at the actual construction. And I don't see how they do any of that kind of construction realistically, with those limits without closing or lane closures. So that's the good and the bad and the ugly on 6/11. And we will have a seat at the table and there will be opportunity to have input along the way regarding 6/11, but it's now moving on to a different life. In addition, I'm going to switch over to the Jersey side. You were represented well. Julia was at the New Jersey Department of Transportation's Public Information Center for their retaining wall replacement project. And I need to speak to this for a moment because today, Warren County, Hardwick Township, and Knowlton Township, we met today to discuss what we think the approach should be in terms of a response to that meeting. So Julia and Michael even attended earlier this year when the DOT showed the local officials what that retaining replacement wall will look like. We didn't ask you to submit comments because if Knowlton and Hardwick and Warren County are submitting comments, that's on behalf of everyone. Even though we certainly could have come over and say, please add another one to it, it's just more busy work. It's just not what we're doing. They did not respond to our comments that we provided, even though they had said they would before this public information center. So they didn't answer our questions, even though they said they would. And what I'm fully aware, because I'm involved in the reports that get written about it, is they showed us at this public information center, nothing different than what you saw, nothing different than what you saw. So what they had the chance to do was to once again, show us what they want to show us and tell us what they want to tell us. And again, ask us to spend our time and resources commenting when we don't get any meaningful benefit out of that. We don't see how they're taking our comments and questions into consideration. So, certainly disenfranchised. So what we did today is we decided very likely, Knowlton and Hardwick and Warren County will come behind it. We'll be passing a resolution opposing the project as proposed. So just 1 second on that. Why would we oppose replacing a dangerous retaining wall, right? The reason for that is they just repaired the 4 critical panels. They just didn't repair them, they stabilized them. They're secure, and there's 7 other panels in poor condition. That's not crisis and emergent. You don't need to do that today. We support them doing the same thing they just did to the 4, to those 7. But why do we need to replace then 38 good and fair panels that are in fine condition? We have our theories about that, but it's very likely that there's no reason to do this kind of risk, 2 years, $97 million of risk, and nothing the list is long on what they say will happen when they touch ground in this area compared to what does happen. So that's gonna be coming up. In addition, I'll share that with you, you'll have that option. Lastly, on that note, we did discuss today the fact that DOT did ask us to comment after this meeting. So what do we do about that? I guess I'm asking the board, since it's the day of the meeting. We discussed everybody that was there submitting, not a comment through the form, but a simple email. Doesn't even, your choice to be on letterhead or not. We're at the point of why do even the effort of letterhead. Submitting a comment saying we're looking forward to the questions being answered that were previously submitted and things like that. And we have no additional comment at this time, other than it was disappointing to see the same presentation we've seen twice now. Something along those lines. So if it's okay with you guys, I'll share the specifics of today with Julia for that kind of a response. Is that okay, sir?
Tara, I think we all should repeat, because we've said this before, our debt of gratitude to you. She has struggled for many years on this alone, and finally, we're starting to make some headway. And really,
Thank you. Any questions? I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you for going.
Sleep well. Sleep well doing it. I know we've reached the right places.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm gonna depart if you don't mind.
That's one of the things.
Question.
Tim has a.
Oh, please.
I just wanna, even though it doesn't really necessarily pertain to Smithfield Township, there's 2 other names I think deserve a lot of credit for their input too. For getting the 611 road hopefully open in a couple weeks. And that's the mayor of Delaware, Mayor Freshborn, and the mayor of Portland, Mayor Fisher. I know they had a lot of input in getting the road open as well, so I think they deserve some credit too.
Certainly, I wasn't meaning to exclude
No, no,
anyone, I felt obligated to let you know your representatives were doing their part. But yes, they've been frontline, totally frontline every step of the way. Yeah, full court, it's been a full court press.
Good.
Okay, good night.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, supervisors' comments. Robert or Michael, do you have anything you want to know?
No, I'm just glad we're making some progress here. It's been a long struggle.
The only thing I wanted to note is that Senator Brown, Rep. Probst, the only thing that I want to note is that Senator Brown and Rep. Probst were crucial in getting LSA funds to township projects in the township, the 300,000 for Smithfield Gateway and State Route 447 for that intersection, and 250,000 for the Smithfield Sewer Authority for the sewer expansion on Severn Bridge Road. So I just wanted to thank them for that, because that's not cheap. Okay, old business. We'll talk about data center criteria. We have Alex Jackson, who is our Conservation and Rec Director. Do you want to sum up what you, there you are, what you put together for us to talk about, to get us in the mindset for?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna show a couple of images just to set the foundation for the discussion, and then I'll present what I put together for the board. Okay, so let me just pull that up real quick. So the board had asked me to do a little bit of research on standards for data centers. So what are data centers? Well, this is an image of a data center down in Virginia. And as you can see, it's a very large industrial building. And I like this image because it's right next to one of the resources they require, which is high voltage power lines. And you can see they have substations and a lot of equipment out there. Here's another schematic, which I thought was, okay. Here's another schematic, which I thought was very helpful, which kind of shows a lot of the outside equipment that comes along with this particular type of use. You can go to the next slide. Here's another image of a data center. Again, it looks like a very large warehouse. They can be exceedingly tall, however, they can be upwards of 85 feet, depending on the needs of the particular landowner. You go to the next slide. And inside the building, there's even more heavy equipment. These are extremely energy intensive uses. They have dozens of these sorts of generators, backup generators. And then you saw the substations outside. If you go to the next slide, please. And then internally, they have, of course, the data centers themselves. And those are all, you can see all the Ethernet cables. And, you know, what is the purpose of these data centers? Well, the way I understand is that's where, like your images go on the cloud. When you save an image and your contacts, it doesn't go up to the sky, it actually goes to these data centers. And recently, data centers have been utilized for AI training of sorts, so that, you know, the algorithms can learn how to respond to human input in very sophisticated ways. And so you might have heard about the press recently with the 3 Mile Island, where there's an organization trying to acquire one of the remaining nuclear power stations so that they can generate electricity just for this type of use. So it's definitely, I see a burgeoning economic situation, and with new technologies emerging seemingly each year. There's one other document that I wanted to show the board, and that's what you have before you on those large Excel sheets. I wanted to put this up here so hopefully the audience can follow along a little bit. So what I put together for the Board of Supervisors is on the y-axis you have the type of standard for the use, and on the x-axis you have up on the top there you have where these standards came from. And I did a little bit of research into your own ordinance, and it turns out the supervisors and the community, you do have some standards for data centers, but in my opinion they are a little out of date. But it's good that you have standards, so there's something there. They're permitted uses, as nearly as I can tell, in the ED and the industrial zone. So if you look at your zoning map, you have all this red area is the economic development district, and then you have the purple, which is the industrial. So they are permitted uses, as nearly as I can tell, in those districts. And when it comes to standards, what do you look for? Whether or not this might be something you can anticipate. I looked at 2 things. One was whether or not you have the really tall high power lines, the ones that are up 100 feet that are supported by those big metallic bases.
Right.
You do actually have one of those running through your economic district. So I would say that there is a probability that such a use could be proposed in your township. And the other thing you want to look for when it comes to standards is, okay, so you have the high power lines, you have the district where it's permitted. Are those districts adjacent to residential properties? And it turns out a lot of your community has ED zone that has direct residential properties next door. So the board might want to consider some standards to address the fact that you could have a use permitted that's directly adjacent to residential facilities, or residential uses rather. And so, you know, that might look like buffers, it might look like buffer provisions, screen provisions, and setbacks from residential uses.
Size limitations as well, for any of those?
The board can set,
Have you seen those in the, sorry to interrupt your
no,
presentation.
that's okay.
Have you seen those in other? Looks like you got a lot of Virginia that you're,
Yeah, Virginia seems to have the most robust standards for discussion purposes, and they seem to be, but I didn't specifically look for building size limitations.
okay, all right.
With our existing, like logistics center and fulfillment center, distribution center types of uses, I think we have caps of like
Speak up, please.
150,000 square feet or something roughly like that
Mhm.
per building, not necessarily per use, but per building, right?
Mhm. You do. Yeah, so if you want to just kind of go down each one, but there are standards for like principal facades and then main entrance features. And I think the purpose for those standards is to try to when these uses do get built, to allow for some character of these buildings, so they're not just giant monoliths with a single color and without any entrance that makes it look like something that, you know, might be conducive to, you know, an economic.
We've also heard, you know, there are requirements in certain areas that essentially you have a front office facade. You know, it doesn't look like just the standard big box, you actually have office space and parking and the landscaping I see that you put here, I mean. That seems to be something I think we would all want. A lot of the existing standards in the zone are great, like on the screening and the backup generators, I mean, those are the big concerns, there's some there that we need to add to.
Yeah, I think these were written some time ago. It does say backup generators, but one thing I noticed is missing are the substations. And as you saw in those schematics, that is going to come with these uses. And those substations can have their own challenges when they're right next to residential zoning districts, in my opinion. For example, you're gonna want some sort of screening, maybe at minimum a setback, so that there's a distance for, like, you don't want a substation within 40 feet of a residential property, for example.
Right.
We can add provisions for how the fencing, you know, how fencing around those sorts of, you know, supplementary accessory portions of the use. I hope I'm making sense, but you can add provisions for the technology as it emerges. I think backup generators, they do, like, these facilities do run backup generator tests, and those can be very loud, so you're gonna wanna have some noise provisions.
Right.
And I noticed that your noise provisions were a little out of date. They quoted something, and so I would at least recommend updating the noise standards so that they're at least consistent with your noise ordinance in here.
Right.
And like you said, screening and buffer and like vegetative buffers, that's another consideration for the board. I'll just finish by saying, basically what I did is I took like a 30,000 foot view, and I see Smithfield Township, and if there's a blank spot there with NA, you might want to consider some reasonable standards.
Right.
You don't necessarily need to have a page for principal facade, but you might want to have some reasonable standards for these things to fill in those blanks
Right.
and update it for this use. Especially considering that it's a permitted use that doesn't go through a hearing. It would be a submission and then it would go straight to land development.
And I think that's something that we can contemplate too, because when data centers were contemplated in the last decade as a potential use, they weren't these power hungry type of behemoths. They were really more like essentially glorified call centers or server rooms.
Mhm.
Now they are the size of some, you know, distribution centers, but without vehicular traffic. So we should probably add a lot of the same standards that we already have and then augment.
Do you know
some
when,
of the-
do we know when data centers? Oh, true, went into our ordinance, I know we have to update these things regularly because they change, you know, warehouses has changed, now we
The
have.
last edition making them a principal permitted use
Would that have been the EV?
was 2020, July of 2020.
What?
Data centers were added as part of the ordinance in July of 2020 as principal permitted uses in that zone.
Well, it strikes me for sure that at a minimum, we should consider, well, adding a bunch of these requirements to, you know, protect our citizens, especially where they're near residential zones, but also probably adding it as a conditional use at a bare minimum. Although, as we know, they meet all the requirements, that doesn't keep them entirely out of certain areas, so we could consider making that more restrictive as well. I think it's totally appropriate, or maybe stating above a certain size can be allowed in.
Correct.
And otherwise limiting these to industrial zones, as that I feel like it's more and more of an industrial use.
I think, I mean, I'm looking forward to the study that we know was mentioned at previous meetings. I want to know what that says, but I think folks should know that the reason we're doing this is not because we're necessarily encouraging the use. It's more like it will happen whether or not we want it, as it is happening in a ton of other areas. I'm sure I don't know if there's just not sufficient direct power in like the Lehigh Valley where they have all the other big boxes, but I know that around here, like Alex said, we're just naturally situated where we have those high quality, but what would you call them, high level power? Power,
Are there any of these in the county? Do we know?
no,
No, there are, or no, we don't know.
no, there are not any thus far.
Another question I just posed because I think it's worth all of us thinking about is, what could these be in the future if they weren't data centers?
Right.
Because maybe the life of these things is 20 years, we don't know, and then the world moves on to something else. What could they be? And for example, I gave Alex an example that when Walt Disney built their animation center in Burbank, California, in the 1940s, they couldn't get a bank loan to build it. And the bank said, you know, what we think we always wanted here is a hospital. So if you'll build this so that we could convert it to a hospital, we'll give you the loan. And they took the loan, and if you go in that center now, the corridors are about 10 feet wide because they were made for hospital beds to go through them. And as a mark of how prescient the bank was, there is a hospital across the street. So in your other uses, other things we could do, and it's a thought question. If we could somehow build these so that there was some modification that we could use it for other things, so much the better.
Because they're not easy to deal with. Let's see.
Well, it sounds like we're in agreement that we need to add a bunch of more criteria and
Yes.
restrict how these can be used as legally as we can. What are the next best steps? Obviously, the ordinance needs to be updated, or do you just update the definition? I guess you have to do a little bit of both.
That'll definitely be both. We'll update.
There's a
the-
section in our ordinance about like additional standards, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's section 27.511, which is supplemental. And that will be updated. We'll need to update definitions and depending on what you choose to do.
Whether it goes
we'll
conditional use,
probably,
whether it goes to a different
Exactly.
zone.
end up updating section 309, which is our schedule of district regulations.
Yeah, because I think we might consider leaving it as a permitted use on, like you said, under a certain square footage. Or with certain more strict criteria, and then beyond that,
Spread point
as
as industrial
as a
zone.
conditional use or industrial, right?
What would the next, I know we've got,
We really
it seems
need to-
like this is pretty urgent. I mean, maybe not super urgent, but the risks are high. And it warrants, I know we've got like not nine, how many ordinances are in the pipeline right now that we're playing with?
I'm working, I have 4 active right now. I believe Alex has 2.
The sign,
The sign and the lighting are quite
Lighting.
substantial though.
both also important. I mean, sign would be nice, it's not urgent. But we are reviewing it. Lighting. What do we have? B&B's just being discussed today.
Yep, give me one moment, let me pull up my notes.
I guess I'm just saying it might warrant,
We can
little
absolutely skip
more
this
focus.
ahead. So, we're working also, the B&B is up for discussion tonight. Special exception
oh
criteria,
yeah, we need that.
transient business, potential ordinance update. And then, we have a submission requirements and notifications policy update docketed. That's requiring and changing the number of physical paper submissions that are due to the board when somebody submits, as well as cementing the policy for notifying, property owners around a piece of
Right,
property.
we talked about that last.
Was this the same one that I wanted to require elevations and sketches in land development submissions too?
That is slated to go in there as well, yes.
Okay.
Good, Christine.
Julie, can you repeat what you said about notifying adjacent property owners?
Sure, so the way the MPC is written, when the township receives a zone change request, we are required, or any zone change occurs. We are required by law to notify the properties that are affected by the zone change. So if we were considering changing Jane Smith's property from a residential to an economic development zone, or if she requested it herself, we would need to notify only her. I don't like that because it doesn't require notification of the property owners surrounding that property, which reasonably, especially going from residential to economic development, would be affected potentially by a change in what use would be allowed on that property. So what we have already done, when the township receives a zone change request, we notify anything that is within the potential zone change, as well as every piece of property that is contiguous to the property being affected. The board likes that idea, and we would like to take that and put it into our ordinances and requirements. So if I win the lottery, we make sure that the next township manager follows the same policies to make sure everyone is aware of what's going on.
Point of order. Question was, notify, that word. When you say notify, do you mean by mail,
Yes,
in person?
no, we send them a letter, and the property is also required to be posted with a public notice. One of the other changes that we implemented, originally we were doing it on regular 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. I believe you and your wife were one of the people that said it was very hard to see. So we've actually doubled the size. The next time you see a public notice posting on a property, it will be on bright pink paper that will be 11 by 17. So it'll be much easier to see from the road.
Yeah, not to be snide or anything, or sarcastic, but it was so hard to see that it was invisible, quite frankly. No one that I know ever saw a posting on the property in question that we.
Yeah, and as part of the zone change update, we're required to have an affidavit of posting by the zoning officer.
Yeah,
So in that file, I do have a picture that Ken was required to take
Yeah.
and give me after he posted it.
yeah,
But, you know, we agree with you. They're very small and they can be difficult to see,
okay,
which is why we doubled the size.
thank you.
Were they notified in writing, the neighbors?
They were not. This is what we're saying. We're changing the ordinance to require that we do in the future and any future managers.
It's too late for that project that just got approved.
That
Right?
was
That zoning change, yes.
a zoning change, not a project.
So,
Go ahead, Christine.
But I could be wrong, but I believe the MPC specifies that adjoining property owners be notified specifically by mail.
It doesn't specify adjoining, the word is
Says
affected.
affected.
So we spoke with Ron. Ron said you're only required to notify the person who is affected by the
Right.
change, which I guess the courts have decided, are just the people undergoing the zone change. Because there's two kinds of zone changes. You can have one where, let's say you or someone else submits a request to the township. And the township can also look at properties and go, hey, this would be better served if it were residential. So it can come from both sides. As such, if you weren't the one that submitted a request and the township was considering saying changing your property to open space, we'd have to notify you. Regardless of what is said with the affected property, Ron feels much more comfortable. I'm far happier that we're notifying more people and making sure that the people around the property, whether it is a zone change that comes from the board or a zone change that comes from a request, like the Riley one that was recently on the docket that was withdrawn, the more people we have notified is better.
Yeah, years ago, I had a zoning hearing requested for a variance. And I guess maybe that's different.
Variances
My
are-
neighbors were notified in writing.
Yes,
For that,
variances,
that's
because that's through the zoning hearing board, are mandated through a different section of the NPC, and that requires different notification times.
Okay. And then I have one more question for Alex, if I may. Alex, you pointed to parcels on the map. Can you identify which parcel that is that you were pointing to for the data center?
So just to clarify, I was pointing to zoning districts, and I was pointing to the economic zone, ED zone, and I was pointing to the industrial zone.
Okay, can you say for the people where those are specifically?
They are, I don't know if I could articulate it,
It's
because
basically all of both 209s.
okay.
Correct.
All, that's
So
what,
industrial being the airport property?
industrial is around the
And then
airport
the
property
paper
and
mill,
paper mill, bygone property.
correct.
And would the parcel that was recently changed, parcel that recently changed its district affiliation, would that be part of that parcel there?
That is part of industrial, yes.
Right? Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that. Go ahead, Brett, and then,
To Michael's point, I believe, recall the gentleman counsel for the Gateway mentioned something about if he was allowed to build a data center across 447, it would solve a lot of their problems, financial problems. It could be a really good deal. And he was talking on a different scale. I believe he said he needed 2 electric power companies to feed the amount of electricity that he needed. And also he mentioned in passing the water. My understanding is data centers require a tremendous amount of water. That may be changing the technology. They need a lot of water and a lot of electricity. And his capacity mentioned between 600 and a million square feet of footprint for a data center. And so
I wouldn't worry about any of this now because it's all speculation. For all we know, in 2 weeks, it'll have vanished. We just don't know.
I mean, I've spoken with him, I know he's exploring all options, including data centers, which I think highlights the need to make sure we have regulations in place that are protective of the community. I think he's at very, very early stages, but I don't know.
as he said it at the last meeting that he spoke at, they were waiting for a preliminary report and then they were going to in fact have a full-scale study done. Which deals with the current capacity and then what's going to be needed, and those are all things that we can address in land development, but it's really the core of the project that we have to address with the ordinance rather than.
Right. So there's a need to get this right as soon as possible.
yeah, and just there's no, maybe consider putting some kind of a water provision thing in your
Water?
considerations.
Yeah.
Just to sort of ensure that I mean, they're gonna ensure the
For
proper,
cooling.
yeah.
They need the water.
The cooling.
I don't know what sort of, I mean, anyone that's gonna go do something like that is gonna make sure they have the access to the water
Right.
before they move forward,
And there's-
otherwise they're not gonna be able to do it.
Right, and there's 2 ways to address that too, that we can talk about. My preference would be not necessarily a joint session, although it certainly could. The last one was fruitful, I think, just to talk about some of these, once we have. I think there's a decent idea of what we have generally, and I think I'd like to let Alex draft something up that we can talk about and read as it would apply to us.
Can we get, I mean, Alex needs guidance.
Yeah.
I mean, can we work towards, as you just said, getting what looks like the best of at least these 4 in anywhere where we have an NA into a draft ordinance? And then maybe some suggestions on conditional use, should it only be an industrial, limits on size?
Right.
And then we can concretely go through specific things and how fast can we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think based on what we see, people would be courteous enough to not submit something. Well, at least the people we know of. So I feel like we have a pretty clear on ramp, because. When you submit land development for this, even if it is, by right as it is now, there's no way you get that inside 6 months, because you're going to need. All those outside approvals, so my guess is I would like to have this relatively close to advertisement by the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, that's 2 months.
Yeah,
That
so
might be hard, but I mean, I
I'd
agree.
rather set the aggressive target and then get it, a week or 2 after, but I think.
Have more public comment.
Yeah, one sec. I think that we need to talk about from the water standpoint, like Brett said, we don't know anything. I don't know if there's anything in here, Alex, about gray water and different things that people are utilizing for coolant versus, just traditional water sources, because we would want like a will serve letter, just like we have for, the existing, sewer and water. We would want that sort of thing, to be a consideration. I mean, those real punch list items, plus incorporating potentially maybe have an A draft for one section that deals specifically with the uses. as they relate to the existing standards on the big box uses, I'll call them.
Mhm.
You know, as like the footprint cap and things like that.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, one second, she had her hand first and then I'll.
I just have a few concerns and comments, and one question is to, Alex directly. Alex, I'm just trying to understand Alex's job description. I know he's hired for parks and recreation, correct?
Conservation and recreation, so
Okay.
deals with sustainability and recreation.
All
There's
right.
not enough,
So is he supposed to protect the environment and the residents?
that is our goal, yeah.
Okay, so where do you come up with writing these ordinance, or he has that job description to write the ordinance for this data center?
But he doesn't do it in a vacuum, like he's
So like,
free to
I
come up
feel
with.
like you're in a rush, and I feel like behind closed doors that you have come to an agreement with a developer. Either
Look,
the Gateway project.
if you are gonna
Or
make
the
insinuations, you better prove them. I'm not gonna entertain innuendo like that in these meetings.
What I'm just telling you.
What,
I
well, I'm just
wonder-
telling you that you're not free to come up with your own facts. What I'm saying is, we need to get this done. That way, we can preserve our ability to protect the people that live next to where these might go.
I mean, but Alex is specifically, all these things are proposing additional protections that don't exist today in the ordinance that was passed back in 2020. So his job is to help create an ordinance that will do exactly what you just asked.
I hope so.
And I'll add that this is not necessarily about Gateway or anything going on there. And what I haven't shared with my fellow supervisors, because we haven't had a chance to meet, is my last meeting with the developers was with a national home builder there. So it may change and go in another direction. We have no idea. This is just a speculation, but maybe it would be Mountain Meadows. We have no idea where anything like this would go, or anywhere else, maybe nowhere. We just don't know.
It's irrelevant, still, we need the protection. I'm
Correct.
sorry, go ahead.
I'm just curious where they're gonna come and get the water from. Are they gonna take it from like the Delaware, from the river, like, where are they getting water? I'm more concerned, I have well.
Oh, sure, now, I mean,
Something like that.
those are the things that we would seek to clarify from developers, because there's existing public water sources in most of the commercial zone. It's just not necessarily throughout, so, in some places there's sewer but not public water, in some places there's water but not sewer.
And typically, I mean, I just attended a meeting with Julia at DEP. Because the water and sewer is looking at slowly growing the public water and sewer down 209, which is sort of the master plan. And it's not that easy, it costs a lot of money. Typically, what you end up seeing, like lots of improvements, is you try to get developers to pay for that water and gas and whatever it is to grow out there. So you tend to think of something like, if this was a major project like this, there's no way they would be able to access it through well. It'd have to be public water system that would be able to work for something like this, without a doubt. So they would have to tie in somehow. If it wasn't already there, they'd have to pay to have it extended and tied in. That's typically how it would work. Talking years, decades of work to get that sort of done, and they'd have to foot the bill ultimately. And DEP, as I understood from that conference, that was my first meeting there. They're very strict about, if you're using a grant to fund it out, if it's for a specific development. They like to know that, because then they try to get that development to foot some of the bill.
Let me add, because I now read several data center journals just to educate myself on these things. And it seems like the trend now is not to use fresh water of any kind, it's to use chemicals that are pumped through, pipes, just like air conditioning, that cool these units instead of using water. That's where they're going down.
Okay.
Can I just ask that in the research for this, that we clarify that that is true and what the true power and water needs are, like per square foot, so that maybe we can find something like that in through the ordinance? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, can you say your name for the minutes?
Mark Soldano. They live on Cotscatter. My question would be, are you guys gonna look, if they do use cooling, generally we use cooling towers?
Cooling what?
Cooling towers. Because they're more economical than, I know what you're saying, but you're using the air, but you're also using a cooling tower, which does use water, but the water's treated and it's kept recycled in the system. So, that's, would be my guess.
Good, Alex, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Did you do look at other ordinances if they're addressing cooling towers? And if that is a thing, that we should definitely incorporate such regulations into our ordinance.
Yeah.
I would think that in addition to looking at other ordinances, which may or may not be up to date, like look at industry standards and what, what the industry protocols are for new construction and, our ordinances, some of them are woefully out of date, so anyone we look to for an example may very well be the same.
It's a good point on lighting and stuff. That's certainly the direction we took. I think this is comfortably enough for Alex to look at for a little bit, so hopefully we can next touch base on this during our
You got your
joint
homework.
session. On,
You're not working on signage anymore. We finished those meetings, so.
So we'll maybe just touch on that briefly to expect to get further procedurally on that after we're done with the next signage discussion. And then hopefully we can set a timeline from there.
Motion to table. Oh, yeah.
Motion by Mr. Albert, second by Mr. Levenheim. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have a public hearing on draft ordinance number 254. I erroneously wrote 253 on the agenda. Just so everyone knows what we're gonna do procedurally is we're going to talk about this, but we are going to open the hearing and consider it open now. But we're not gonna vote on it because there are potential changes that we're going to evaluate with the draft ordinance as currently advertised. But this allows us to not have to re-advertise the hearing itself, just the ordinance. So I wanted to make that procedural note clear. That way we can still have a discussion without voting to approve what we have.
Point of order. May I approach?
Yes, you can talk, but we want to get into the discussion.
I'll make it quick. It was my understanding that a hearing, a public hearing, is usually attended by the solicitor and a stenographer. There you go. Is there a reason why there's neither of those are present tonight?
They're not necessary to conduct all of them when they are not. Now, don't make a face.
The hearing is.
We're having a hearing, we're not voting
It's
on
not
it.
a hearing.
Hold on, we're gonna start on and discuss most of these things. Ron had a very personal matter
Understand.
that he couldn't be here for.
Right.
So we're gonna discuss that, and which we found out at 5 o'clock today. And if you wanna know afterwards, I can tell you what it is.
No,
It's
it's
pretty
okay.
serious.
No problem.
And we have not had stenographers for all of, hearings.
Okay, so you're not having this, I just want it on the record. You've decided not to have a stenographer and you've not been able to get the solicitor to attend or a substitute attorney. Okay.
Frame it how you want, but that's. Okay.
We can table, but we wanna get input from, because we're gonna make a bunch of changes, because you have made some recommended changes, the Monroe County Planning Commission. So as opposed to just saying, let's talk about it later, we want to have an opportunity to talk about all the changes that you're suggesting. That's
Swing away.
That's why we're here.
So can we just call it a discussion instead of a public hearing?
It's already advertised as a hearing.
So the reason the board is acting as they are is because whenever the board wants to pass an ordinance, we are required. Sorry, I'll talk louder. Whenever the board wants to pass an ordinance, we are required to advertise with the Pocono Record. Every time we do that, it costs the township hundreds of dollars. We don't want to just toss money at anything for any reason. So by having the board, having this public hearing, talking about this, and then at the end of it, they will vote to continue the public hearing and announce when and where the next public hearing on this will be held, it will prevent us from having to re-advertise this ordinance and save the township money. So the reason that they are doing this is that the planning commission has had some wonderful thoughts on what we can do to improve this ordinance. The Monroe County Planning Commission has also commented on this, and the board is interested in discussing incorporating some of those changes into the current ordinance as it stands. Was that loud enough?
Very good.
Okay.
Cool. The planning commission has 8 recommendations. I'm going to say them and then we can talk about them. I'm not going to go,
The Monroe County one?
I'm gonna go with the township one first. They're very similar, but want to go through these 8 first. 1C, specify maximum.
We should table their discussion on this, so.
We're not gonna have a procedural discussion every single time we talk about an item.
But they did table it.
They had an
But that-
opportunity to review it, and that is their prerogative. And they provided a bunch of recommendations. They did not recommend it yes or no, correct?
Right, but they have to do that still, right?
They have the opportunity.
They have the
can
opportunity to do that.
decline
That is
to
not how it works.
they
If
would
the
like
planning
to.
commission chooses not to make a recommendation on something, that can be a recommendation of no, but they made a recommendation among a bunch of suggestions. They're gonna see it again and they're gonna have an opportunity.
Cause yeah, they didn't make a motion on those, whatever.
We understand that.
We have the minutes.
So there's potential to specify a maximum of 2 guests per bedroom plus 1 child. Update the lighting standards for this use when the Board of Supervisors adopts the lighting ordinance, which we're gonna talk about a bit later. Add increased detail in the standards for determining the adequacy of on-lot sewage facilities and if applicable, for confirming sufficient capacity exists with the Smithfield Sewer Authority. Like we just talked about with warehouses or data centers, it's the same principle. You wanna make sure you have that. Revise standards specifying that breakfast must be served to guests on site. Include standards that specify automatic severance and termination of the permit if the primary owner moves. Include provisions for revoking the permit if the use causes community disruption. If the owner is an LLC, a member of the LLC must be present on site. And add standards explaining operating hours and quiet hours. So those were.
I submitted 2 more to Alex. If you want me to.
Yeah.
Elucidate them. First was, I think, this should be limited to existing structures or additions to address existing structures. And that's specifically because, we discussed the idea that somebody could come in and just put a bunch of shipping trailers in a yard, call it a B&B. So it has to be in an existing structure or an addition. And also I feel that, this should, all rooms should have an ensuite bathroom facilities, which is pretty standard in B&Bs, but we don't have it in here. And I think it makes this more of a alternative hotel than, let's say, an alternative rooming house. So that, that's part of what I think should be in it.
Right, and just to be clear, the township already does not have short-term rentals. Bed and breakfasts are distinct. And the intent is to just clarify that distinction while also making it a bit easier to conduct this business as it already is being done. Just with more provisions that allow us to regulate more quickly when an issue occurs. Okay. Where do we want to start?
Well, and the Monroe County Planning Commission had some additional comments as well. You know, highlighting, I mean, I think it's important. The main reason we looked at this to begin with is because there was a bunch of incorrect references in the definition and in the bed and breakfast ordinance, lots of references to B1, B2, that don't exist anymore. So that honestly, we had a joint session where we were looking at all of the hotel, inn, B&B, basically any sort of lodging in our township. Yeah, it was like 9 months ago.
Mhm.
it was a session and the goal was because the definitions all need to be updated. And we're like, all right, let's start with the easiest one, bed and breakfast. And here we are 9 months later, still chipping away. So because all these they need tweaks. They all need to be fixed, inns and what's the other one? Inns and hotels, motels, resorts. They're sort of similarly defined. Some have acreage, some don't.
Correct.
Some are allowed by right, some of them have completely different definitions, but are all allowed in the exact same places, so why is there a different definition? So it's all stuff we needed to do. B&B we wanted to address first because it had, all these incorrect references. And we thought, well, let's try to improve it while we're at it. So that's sort of where we started from. And I think generally, just so everyone is aware of the intention, at least from that initial conversation, was that there was a view that we definitely do not want short-term rentals. And there was an attempt to make it so that this was a different definition of short-term rentals, which Monroe County Planning Commission specifically said in their letter, you've done a good job of differentiating from a short-term rental. But we also wanted B&Bs to have a little bit of flexibility. For instance, if someone had another building on their property, or if they have two properties next to each other and they have an empty house and they want to be able to live adjacent and have that be a B&B, that they would be allowed to do that. That was the goal. So now we just have to see how we make it written well so it affects everyone the way we want it to.
All of the comments from the county planning commission make a lot of sense. I mean, of course, 5 and 6 are completely boilerplate. And number 4 says, good job, as it does at the top. I think on number 2, I don't think our intent was to permit it by right in all districts.
Yeah.
I don't think the purpose was to make it a principal permitted use in all districts. I think the thought was to keep it in like R1, R2, RC, and ED. We talk about existing structures though.
The other thing is, I mean, what we've had a conversation, and Doug, you'll recall, we've had these conversations before around for the idea of like a township that has tons of conditional uses versus permitted uses. So the challenge with conditional uses, it's great because it guarantees you have the board of supervisors sees them. But as we have seen, sometimes you have a conditional use that nobody wants, but because they fulfill all the requirements legally, they're going to be allowed to have it. So I don't know how much protection a conditional use provides. And what it does is it bogs down on cost, time frame. I'm just saying, I'm all for it. If we want to put this as a conditional use. Is it a conditional use right now?
Yeah.
I believe so. I will double check.
I mean, my thought had been, when Julie and I looked at this briefly with the software to look at what other townships are doing.
Yeah.
Permits that are 1 year help a little bit with that because you have to fulfill the requirements of the permit. So it's still getting seen.
Which
and they
requires that they register for the occupancy tax.
require for the tax. But yeah, I mean, from my standpoint, if a conditional use makes more sense, I know, and as a planning commission member, we talked about how, why don't we just make things that we want to be allowed and things we don't want and put all the requirements, but.
Bed and breakfasts are conditional uses in R1, R2, RC, and they are principal permitted use in RE.
I got a question. What are A, B, and Bs? Are you addressing A, B, and B?
We are not talking about Airbnbs. These are bed and breakfasts. So they're not short-term rentals.
And the owner has to
A,
be,
B, and B is short-term rental.
correct,
And A, B, and B is short-term rental.
correct.
Yes.
They're not allowed.
That's why, okay.
The main difference is the owner has to be on property or this says adjacent properties. They have to be present.
We're also talking about, or their designee if it's a corporate owned entity.
I don't know if I love that, but.
I mean, I'm just saying that's what we're talking about. I wasn't even gonna say necessarily make it conditional uses. I think we can have that discussion. But I don't see them being in the M1 zone or
I
the,
don't know why.
or the ED zone. Well, especially because, well, Robert doesn't think that you want them to be only with existing structures, not new construction. So that kind of limits it to really existing nonconformities then.
And remember this, even in an R1 zone, which is our principal, single family home zone. Most of the houses in the Poconos are about 2,500 square feet. 2,500 square feet average house. I think for anyone to have one of these with 3 or more bedrooms, they need 3,500 square feet, especially since you have to have a bathroom with every suite. So there's not a lot of places where we're gonna have them, even when we talk about them.
Right. One of the things that the planning commission talked about was requiring conditional use approval only for at bed and breakfast serving 4 to 6 guests, whereas 3 and under could be permitted by right. I mean, I don't see a major distinction between, 3 or less and 4 and 6, enough to warrant a $3,500 escrow to make sure that you're doing your project.
What does I don't actually have the draft ordinance, I have, oh, yes, I do, I'm sorry.
Yes, it's in front of that.
This says what?
I believe it says 6 guest rooms.
Maximum 6 guest rooms. That's a lot.
I don't think there are many structures around that could take 6 guest rooms, but. I think Stony Brook is what, 3? That what Pete has down?
Right, yes.
That's probably about right. But it's like, okay, you find some huge house and you wanna do it, 6 seems more reasonable. I can only think of one house that's that big, which is next to the Dollar General on Milford Road. If they ever wanted to convert it.
I don't even think
they
that
do
is
it.
that.
6 is a lot.
Yeah,
Because you need the 6 including the owners.
No, 6 guests.
well, it says
6 guest
facilities.
rooms.
It says facilities. I interpret that to mean the structure. I'm not sure. Edward,
I was wondering, how's that work in private developments? I'm in a private development. So that's gonna create more traffic on our roads and stuff. And put hardship on,
This is zoning.
our,
yes, but so he does not, you live in an association that is not a planned.
Not a
residential-
PRD. Okay.
Correct. So our zoning is still applicable there, just as it is already right now. The difference is this is not applicable in a
PRDs.
planned residential development that, has those covenants.
For me and for everyone else, what are the HOAs that are PRDs? Shawnee Valley,
I think that's it. I think the others,
including like North Slope and all those,
I think
Yeah.
Shawnee Valley is the only PRD, isn't it?
correct,
but that means North Slope 1, North Slope 2.
correct, because all the others are, I mean.
HOAs.
What?
Yeah, but homeowners associations are not the same. Our zoning still applies in a homeowners association, but not in a planned residential development, which is exempt from the local zoning.
Just help me out a moment. I've spoken with several people in several different HOAs. And they claim that their covenants are, that they preclude any B and Bs.
Only if, well, if they preclude it, then that overrides.
So that overrides township ordinance.
I don't think so, not in.
Well, I believe it overrides it with,
with the
When you
they
have-
can't come to the township
Right.
and complain, but they can enforce it however they would enforce it.
I think only a PRD can.
Right.
override it.
We can't enforce an HOA's rule, right? We can enforce, or try to enforce our own rules. We can barely do that. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
But we
Like caveat there.
we can't enforce an HOA rule that's not part of our rules, right? But the HOA can enforce it, however they would enforce it. Does that make sense? The HOA says you can't have
B and B.
lawn signs, then, but if our ordinance doesn't say that, they can't come here and say, you have to give them a fine, because they put, like, it's not our
The
ordinance.
essential difference is a planned residential development is different than something that is contemplated in the Uniform Communities Act, which are those associations that you think of.
Uh-huh.
But a PRD is exempt from the township zoning. The thought is the zoning is that development, how it's set up.
Right.
So that is self-enforced. So an association different than the road association and other associations of that type. They contemplate different things and how they're enforced. They
Thank you.
rely on covenants versus, an actual administration.
Just all I advise is that when you guys get back together on this, an executive session or whenever Ron is present, you should run all this by him, what we just discussed. HOAs, because we are told by HOAs that are lawyered up, can't do it.
Well, the various choices, they can't do it, they can't do it.
There's case law that deals specifically with that like doesn't affect us. So,
I don't see how we get involved, but.
correct,
Fine. Thank you.
yeah.
I have
So-
a question. So does that work opposite? Like, what if there's an HOA that does allow short-term rental? Should they not be allowed to do that because of your ordinance for Smithfield Township?
It depends on if it's an existing non-conforming use that was registered. The township adopted the short-term rental regulations in 2016. So if you already had one prior to that, and it's a zoning matter, not a general safety matter, then it would not be enforceable. So.
Is that
if I-
rule in zoning?
Yes,
So the PRDs are exempt from that,
correct. And that's generally.
which is why Wyndham is exempt. from
And the
that.
underlying zones are where they're permitted. I think they're also permitted in a resort zone, but there are very, very few resort parcels. They are like Ski Shawnee and the other part up above Mountain Manor, which are the two resort blue
It's not
zones.
any, yeah.
No, which is why it's not been an issue because we don't permit them in residential zones.
Right.
So what I was gonna say
What is
is.
the other questions?
I'm just looking to get clarification on what exactly a short-term rental is. It's not, at least to me, not very clear.
Sure. I mean, those are.
Correct, Airbnbs are not, sorry, short-term rentals, which is what we call them, are not allowed. You can go on Airbnb and you see hotel reservations as well, that's just a corporate method of
Correct.
finding a place to stay. We're not saying you can't book something on Airbnb if it was a hotel, that was allowed, but you
Correct.
can't have a short-term rental.
So then in the Shawnee Village, there where if you go on to Airbnb, you see them
Yeah.
because it's the hotel.
Or it's the Wyndham part of the PRD, and those are.
Where it's
The ones
permitted,
by the ski area, they're
Yeah.
right, they're on there.
Well, they'd be non-conforming anyway, but they're also in the PRD, so they don't apply anyway.
So it's more the individual houses that are no.
right, because what we don't want are the so-called party houses that you end up with 30 people that completely destroy a septic system and overload the neighborhood with trash.
And by the way, I don't know if anyone heard, the township, the planning commission did highlight the need to confirm that a bed and breakfast would be able to handle the water and sewer, so I think mean, there's gotta be certain language in permit applications and conditional use requirements that would allow that. That makes sense.
I just want to say relatively clearly
Or
where,
for water and sewer, if they're attached to water and sewer, that's fine.
right. It says add increased detail to this H section, which says potable water supplies and adequate sanitary facilities. I think that basically the same way in I with earth disturbance and stormwater references chapter 26. If we have a similar, very nominal reference that
Yeah.
should address that concern. The breakfast on site thing, it sounds like everyone was on board with that, so that's easy to comply with. You just,
And
Strike.
everybody's on board specifically because the draft that we read says that they do not have to serve breakfast on property. So when you say everybody's on board, what specifically are they on board with?
as I literally just stated that we were on board with having it served on site.
Okay.
So I'm just going over what our discussion has
I know
been.
there are certain bed and breakfasts that exist now that don't do that, but they give coupons, but.
Well, I'd rather support small business. I don't really care. I don't know why anyone else does.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Well, we can because
I
it's
agree.
a private neighborhood, right? That's the rationale for us moving there to have a peaceful community for our kids.
Right,
That's why we can.
but someone driving from that house to go get breakfast at a nearby local restaurant, if that's where the owner,
Want the serene atmosphere of having familiar neighbors.
but you don't think it's
Right?
serene
You
if
don't
people
want a
are.
revolving door,
No,
where today is Mr. X, tomorrow is Mr. Y, and you don't know who's in the house next door. There are communities that allow for that, and we've all heard the horror stories.
Yeah, this is not about allowing Airbnbs. I want to make that clear. This is about allowing bed and breakfast. The owner has to be there. So you're gonna know that owner.
So how is that going to be enforced? What is the guarantee that you know that the owner is on site?
It has to be owner occupied, so they're it's their primary residence.
Ma'am, may we have your name for the record?
Sophia.
And your last name?
NARE.
That's what this says.
Thank you.
It
But
says
it
that they
doesn't have to
doesn't
be
have to pay.
occupied.
If the owner violates
Because
it,
of that-
we can pull the permit.
Their house next to it, but it doesn't have to be on.
Yeah, sorry, owner occupied or adjacent property.
Yeah, adjacent property, so you could have somebody that you don't know in the property and do whatever, and but the other people who own the property don't know.
Yeah.
They live
That's
next door.
I mean, that's what
what's
she's
being
talking,
enforced.
that's what she's
That's
talking
what we
about.
But
wanna know,
there's
you
no
know?
way to legally regulate that though. That's
Well, why not?
why not, redlining has been illegal for a long time. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, George. What if I don't know one of my former neighbors that has lived there for 20+ years?
That's on you. That's why we chose to move to a private community.
Okay.
We know everyone in the neighborhood.
Okay, but I
This is
could,
not redlining.
So-
We are asking our township, if you're going to create an ordinance, there has to be some protective features. And
Correct,
what are those protective features? That's all we're asking.
correct.
no,
We're
we
discussing.
agree with you. This ordinance is adding those protective features.
And what are they? You just said you cannot enforce that the owner is on site. You
No,
just-
we
you
can't.
just said that.
You can enforce.
We can enforce that. The contemplation was whether or not they could also be on the adjacent property. Some people, if I have 2 acres, say they're subdivided, I own my house and then I own the house next door.
Mhm.
We don't necessarily believe that it shouldn't be legal for that person to make that home next door a bed and breakfast.
Okay, so can private communities apply to be exempted from this?
What is a private community?
No.
What do you mean, so hold on, what do you mean by private community? You mean an HOA? So the HOA can have its own rules that limit what you're allowed to
Yeah,
do.
homeowner associations, yes.
Yeah, you can have the HOA, we can't mandate something.
You can have
supersede
your
a-
own restrictive
restriction.
covenants, which are different than our ordinance. Because the vast majority of our township does not live in a private association. So we're making general policy. If your HOA doesn't permit it already, this is not going to force them to permit it.
Okay,
So we're just trying to make sure that folks that do have it, because there's like probably at most 5 that are actually operating in the whole township. We're making sure that they have enough sewage capacity or connection to other public utilities. We're making sure that someone is responsible and that there's a permit. We're making sure that they're registered with the county, so they're paying the proper hotel tax. which is audited on a random basis, which we don't get automatically, by the way, the county collects that. So the hotel tax is allocated by the county, we can request discretionary funds as we have and are hoping to receive, but we're not guaranteed to receive those. They fund the Pocono Mountains Business Bureau, which promotes the area.
The only thing I say, it's not regulated, but that's the only thing I disagree with you on, is it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
This ordinance is regulating it though, George, this doesn't exist to regulate right
You
now.
say the contingency of a house next to the other, and you can have one family in the house itself, and the owner of the house next door, that is not redlining.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but it's not redlining, that's all I'm saying.
Oh, all right, maybe you're not, but I think when people generally are talking about how they don't know people, that's
I'm
not
not talking about that, I'm saying,
correct. I'm not,
not knowing people has nothing to do with it.
well, and that's what I was trying to say. Yeah,
I just want to be sure that people think we're trying to redline in this area. We're not, nobody's trying to redline.
Here's a silly question.
Hold on.
Hold
hold on, let Janet ask, please.
My turn. Okay. I think most of you know, I'm the president of the Howland Lake Association, which is an HOA.
Yes.
Okay, my husband is the president of the Howland Road Maintenance Fund, which is also an HOA. Okay, and I understand what Cynthia is
Yeah.
talking about as far as the covenant is concerned, that we can take care of in private development.
Right.
And stop it in private development.
Correct.
I have 2 points I want to make. One, a couple months ago, I came to a meeting and I had mentioned that we have an Airbnb in our development off of Beaver Terrace that has been renting out to people that come in for a week at a time. We put it, the Howland Road Maintenance Fund actually put in a complaint form about this. And to today, to the best of my knowledge, it's still running.
What?
So what bothers me is that where we're talking about regulating this, okay?
There's definitely a lot of enforcement on Airbnbs. I know that. I mean, Julia, just to get to your point, can you look very quickly where that stands on Ken's list?
I'm looking it up right now.
Right.
There's like
It
8
is-
pages of complaints and
I'm
orders.
but
I'm just
this-
saying.
This was done back in February.
Okay.
So I'm just saying, my issue is that regulating, I understand about the B&Bs, I totally, I get it. But as far as the Airbnbs are concerned, I find that they're kind of slipping under, you know, and they're not being taken care of, because in our development alone, that one is a major complaint. We've had major issues with it to the point where there was an incident in our development where actually someone was being held hostage in a house. And it just escalated, it was a horrible situation, okay, we wanted to stop, but that's something I just wanted to mention about the Airbnbs. Second thing was, my question was, in an R1 zoned area, private community, or not even private, just R1, okay, you're not allowed to run a business out of a single family development. Okay, so
We can,
the only kind of business I understand that you can run out of it is if it's something, say for instance, you're an accountant and you have one person come into your house. Or if you have something small where it's like a one person coming. An Airbnb, some Airbnbs can actually have 5 or 6 or 7 couples in that, which would make it more than just a simple little business.
that's,
being run out of
again, that's why it's supposed to be owner. The owner's supposed to be there. That theoretically would not be possible for, this is about a bed and breakfast. This doesn't change not allowing Airbnbs. They're still not allowed.
But wouldn't that be something that the board should take into consideration, that you're not allowed to have a business being run out of a R1?
These are existing, for the most part, these are existing businesses.
Okay.
Wait,
So
what are you talking about?
the bed and breakfasts that are existing, like, we're not talking about permitting something that hasn't been.
It's already, you already can have it.
Right.
Right.
Right, okay, I just wanted
It's
to
one of,
clarify that.
it's one of the permitted ones, so like, if you wanted to do that with your house, for example, you would have to get a change of use permit.
Right.
So you have to go through that process, and then it would have to follow the rest of these obligations that we're going to impose. But, we're not going to broaden it, that's why Robert's talking about having it be like existing structures and not new construction,
Thank
that
you.
type of thing.
question, when you said existing structures, so anyone can modify their house, like if it's built on a roof and 3 bedroom, they convert it to a 5 bedroom. And put small bathrooms in there.
We're talking about maintaining the, like, we're not, he talked about additions, but I think generally we're talking about.
That's not what the
only
ordinance says right now.
Correct.
I just.
Right, my understanding is, but by the ordinance said right now, if you were able to put an addition on your home and go through your land development, your building permits and requirements, because you wanted to be able to have someone that lives in your house and propose a B and B, you can do that today. And you can still do that under this situation. You can't actually build a second home on your property because that is not allowed. So that's why that would only be for places that already have that.
What if you have the property next to you own, and it's, you've never built anything on it, you can build a house there, can you not? And then you live in the
You
big.
can't build another house on, because you can't have more than one primary.
If you have
use
it,
on
if
one
you have,
building.
if you own the property next to your house.
Yeah,
And you want.
and
to
it's an empty land,
It's empty land.
yeah,
You want to put a house there and make it a rain breakfast, you can do that.
yeah, and by the, yes, that's what this says, you could do that if you wanted to do that.
Or subdivide a larger parcel.
If you get the covenant.
Yes, you could do that, that's what this says. If you wanna have if you wanna run a bed and breakfast and not be in your actual house, but be next to you, you can do that, that's what this says.
Michael, how are you gonna know? Are you gonna send like someone to come and check? Like,
It's a well, right now, this says you have to get a permit, this says you have to have a permit,
So
so.
you're trying to say that the owner has to be there 24 hours round the clock, correct?
Well, what's it say?
The owner has to be there when there are guests there. So
But how-
whenever guests there, whether it's,
How is the township gonna check on it, seeing when they have bookings or when they're gonna have the guests? Like, is there gonna be some kind of communication back and forth with the township?
Yeah.
Hey.
I mean, the
have
same way,
a guest coming this week.
I would argue the same way that a current bed and breakfast might work. I mean, do we know that the bed and breakfast owner is there on property? I don't think so.
remember, if we get complaints, we can pull the permit. So it ends, we can say, you're out of business.
That was the idea of that as well, that a permit can be.
Yeah,
taken away.
but you also get complaints for Airbnbs, you know, since we have an ordinance.
But they're illegal in the first place.
But the thing is, it's not stopping, and if you go on the RVO or Airbnb, you'll see there's a lot in Smithfield Township.
Yeah, most of them are Wyndham.
No, there's a
Okay,
lot,
I don't,
really, that's out of that area.
okay.
Our
There's some
biggest,
Smithfield Village. So like, I'm just saying, if you have a hard time controlling them, how are you gonna control the B&Bs?
our biggest problem
They are
with trying to control Airbnbs, which are illegal, is finding the owners.
Well,
Because
it's-
so many of them are absentee owners, and where do they live? Florida, New Jersey? How do we get hold of them? What do we
It's not
do?
that hard.
I know there are at least a couple
You
that
look
are
at the
from,
GSI mapping, remember, me and you sat down, we worked together 3 years ago.
Right, but it
You
doesn't
look
mean we
at
can
the
find, even if we find they're in another state, serving them, finding them, it's extremely difficult.
I believe a couple of them are pre-2016, but I don't know about this stuff.
Why is it difficult to serve them? You serve them at their tax address and.
certified mail.
Certified mail, and that should meet every legal requirement there is.
You would think so. Before I answer your question, may I have your name for the record?
Oh, my name is Hal Harris.
Thank you, sir. Unfortunately, people change their addresses and don't update the counties. We have encountered multiple times where we have sent certified mail out and it comes returned undeliverable to send it to us. We're actually working with Ron right now for how we need to go about, actively getting a hold of a property owner and pursuing judgment against someone when they're basically an owner that doesn't exist. You would think it would be very easy, and I had wished that it was, but the rough concept that Ron has discussed right now is that you first have to get a sheriff and pay a sheriff or some other person to attempt to physically serve that person on that property. which is a useless thing to do if they are not on the property. After that, you are required to do searches through phone books to try and find other addresses. You have to try and look at how, like people searches, Spokeo, things like that, to try and find a valid address for this. And you need to send out letters to them then at these addresses, but those letters, because they're addresses that aren't the actual county address, might not be able to hold up. So it's actually something we are researching and looking into right at this time, because we have multiple violations that our zoning officer has issued that have come back to us, and we are going, what do we do now? So we are trying to resolve this, but it is a very long process that our solicitor is still looking into.
Another problem we have is it's under the zoning laws. So even if we send out a notice, we've got to give that person 30 days to respond. And if they respond and they want to go to the zoning hearing board, they can keep going until they go to the zoning hearing board. What I proposed in this new signage amendment, which we're considering, or signage ordinance, I should say, because it's outside of the zoning ordinance, it's a standalone ordinance, is that we count online ads as signage in the township, so that if you have an unlawful sign, and even if it's on Airbnb, we can say, okay, that's a sign for something that's not allowed, we can fine you. Then we can fine you immediately.
Okay, at this point though, that we're gonna have to come to consensus on a couple things so we can get this moving and select the next date.
One more quick thing.
I got you and Brett, and then we're gonna pick those two things.
So in advance of tonight's meeting, a few of the residents got together, concerned obviously about what this means, particularly in R1 and R2 districts. So we do have 163 signatures on a petition regarding the area or the bed and breakfast ordinance, and that, essentially what we're saying is kind of like it the way it is.
Well, first of all, the way it is right now is wrong. It has to be changed. There's definition problems in it. So it's gonna have to be changed at some point,
Particularly concerned about R1 and R2.
which is where it is allowed right now as well.
Could you explain what's wrong, or I don't understand, is it?
There's references to B1, B2.
Correct.
There's, that don't exist in our township anymore. It's just an old definition. All of a lot of our definitions, we started going through them. This is literally the first one, because they all need to be updated. But a lot of people don't like any change whatsoever, but you have to sometimes.
But it is a conditional use right now, is.
Correct, and I think it could be that as well. Just gonna tell you, conditional uses don't protect you from it happening. If someone meets all the criteria required, that's not what a conditional use is.
Right, but we do remember, I mean, I remember when Gwen Caldwell had the Shawnee Fall Studio. I remember when she actually came for her hearing, and then another hearing, she got it, it was appropriate. That's terrific, that kind of thing is terrific, put it down. But this way, I think it really is not fair to the citizenry. I just don't think it's fair.
I think it makes sense to have it as a conditional use as well.
That's why we're having this discussion, so we can make
The
sure.
way it was done then was beautiful and healthy and so on.
And 100 and some people agree.
Yeah, and the people,
So, go ahead.
makes our town good rather than
So,
scary.
Deborah Markey, so my question is, what will protect your residents to some degree? Adding additional stipulations to this? What we're concerned about is, someone mentioned about, it could be possible if there's a large plot of land that could be subdivided. So then how many bed and breakfasts could go on there? And then that creates a huge impact to a neighborhood. It's not just, one house with, that may have 5 or 6 rooms, may not be an issue, but you're talking about something like that, that's a huge impact to a neighborhood. We being an R1, obviously we're R1 for a reason, right?
Yeah.
So how can you help protect us? I think it's a fair question, and I think that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. I would just say like, why you have a hearing, looking for input on how to add those protections. Right now, there's not a lot of protections in the ordinance right now. So we're adding a bunch of stuff. So adding more is great, yeah.
Not in R1?
Well, bed and breakfasts are almost always in R1, that's what a bed and breakfast is.
Right, oh, but that doesn't mean it has to be here, true in our township, does it?
They already are.
Well, they already are, and I mean,
That's existing.
I think bed and breakfasts are nice, I mean, if they're done right and they're with the right protections. That's my
The
feeling,
problem is, you know, if you get a situation where there could be many, like I said, that could be.
yeah,
changing.
Well, so when you deal with a major subdivision like that, there's gonna be a lot of other requirements where the intent is for literally like single structure facilities, not to take 50 acres and then put 50 separate, like that, we would consider that to be one development and
I mean,
not.
it honestly should be, maybe it can be one that someone can
We could
do a
say it
maximum
can't
of
be
one
more.
B and B, right? That would be a nice provision.
Yeah, that would be correct.
Anyone can only have a maximum, I think that makes sense, because then otherwise you're not running a bed and breakfast, right?
Holiday.
Correct.
Definition you can do.
Well,
By definition, you only have one?
Well, you.
If
you
it's
have to
owner
live in it,
occupied.
Have one next door.
Yeah, but I guess, but the other thing is, what if you had a parcel and then somehow you magically made
we could say
50
that use would.
adjacent? I mean, technically, you could maybe do it, but you'd never get the.
John, maybe from an
subdivision, but-
engineering standpoint, you can tell me if this is possible. We have different provisions, like in the economic development zone that essentially promote further subdivision of major mixed-use developments like Gateway, so they can eventually have their separate owners when the developer who puts it there is ready to sell them off or whatever. We can restrict further subdivision of a use, correct?
You can always put, if the developer accepts the condition,
So that's
you
why
can
we would
always,
make it a
you
conditional
can make a
use.
condition of approval. You don't even have to have it as a conditional use. You-
Right.
Unless the developer brings in a perfectly clean plan, which is rare,
Right,
you can make a condition of approval that it can be no further subdivided. There are
that's been done on by road uses.
There are many plans on record right now that contain the note that this property can no longer, cannot be any further subdivided.
So I would be in favor of that. I think that makes a lot of sense. We're also keeping, room caps, we're talking about the maximum of, people. I think it might be slightly ambiguous here, but if we clarify.
Put a person cap on it too,
Yeah.
there's lots of things that can be done.
Correct. So like the intent of this is to make it fundamentally more strict than it is today. It's just we need to deliberate about how to do it exactly.
But let's look at the cost of this. If somebody wants to do this, even with these requirements, it's probably an investment of somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000.
Well,
You
they
have to
can
build the
make money, yeah.
bathrooms, you have to have the sewer up to date, blah, blah, blah. How many of these are gonna go up here? I mean, I think from this ordinance, if we got 5 more, it would be a lot in the township.
Probably.
Can I ask for clarification from John? When you say you can make it a condition of development or subdivision, at what point does that condition get attached to the property? Upon purchase, or how does that get tied to the parcel?
When they're going through the land development process, as a condition of final approval, that the developer would have to accept that condition. And then it gets noted right on the plan, and then when the plan is recorded, it's there forever.
So if someone comes in with a land development plan that says, okay, I have 50 acres and I want to subdivide into 10 5-acre parcels. So you would attach a condition that that's it, you have 10 5-acre parcels, but then they could build 10 houses and make them
They lived in the middle.
and live in the middle, right? If they could.
And it touched everyone, right now. You're right,
They could.
you're right.
If you eliminate the adjacent parcel, then you really have it.
If we said.
One adjacent parcel.
So it's one structure.
One structure, yeah, I mean, why not? The whole idea is like if someone has a cottage next door to them, that was the idea of it.
Right.
And I know
Yes,
of
they
two residents that have this, that would love to be able to have
Right.
a guest come in.
So if someone owns a parcel here, and they also own this parcel here, and another parcel there, where does the Is there only this parcel that can
Jason
be
touching the property.
touching, has to be touching?
That's what it
So
is.
if another parcel is touching that parcel, what about that parcel?
No,
And I think it makes sense to add one maximum of one
Right?
Correct.
building.
What if the property is across the road?
Properties across the road are considered adjacent. We've applied that same rule to notification. So if you wanted to do a zone change, for example, and have a road, anything across the other side is permitted. Or excuse me, not permitted, but across the other side is notified.
I don't know that that was your question, was it?
Yeah, she just said,
If I have my house
generally the
here,
definition
and
means, yes,
And
it would
across
be
the
adjacent.
road, there's another property that I own, and I wanna convert that to a B and B. Or build a B and B there. If I live across the other side of the road, you know?
Generally, I mean, my feeling is the whole reason why Airbnbs were a problem is because of owners that weren't there, weren't proper, and there are communities where there's different restrictions and they go fine, and people have another way to have a little bit of income to offset their mortgage and all those things, and they work well. And so the idea that someone, if, as long as they're there and property is, is relevant and everyone knows who owns that building, I tend to believe that you would not have many problems. Maybe you would. That's my feeling.
And again, it comes down to enforcement, and I think we all know that our enforcement game here in Smithfield Township is absolute crap. And
well, I'm gonna
that's a
disagree.
real.
I'll disagree. I mean, I've been enforced on many things as well. I mean, it's not always easy, but.
I think that we've, actually, Julia, you can literally quantify how many enforcement notices have been sent out. I don't know, in the manager's report that you sent us.
I can't tell you exactly how many we've sent out. What I can say, give me a moment to find that tab again. And to actually back up, Janice,
Yes.
resolution wise, that complaint has been resolved because we have been unable to locate any proof that Airbnb exists. It's not listed on Airbnb, it's not listed on VRBO. So if you are able to find another site, I looked at it and I just double checked myself, it's not on there right now. So if you find another site or have other proof that says, hey, this is operating, please give it to us. Because we looked and we can't find anything on it right now.
Okay.
And getting back to where I was, we currently have. Resolved 32 complaints. And we currently.
Julia, I have it right
Please let me
here.
finish, and we have completed 26 of them. Or excuse me, we have 26 open. Those are only zoning related, they don't reference the requests.
Okay.
Did you find it?
If you could.
Yeah.
No, not right now. Please send it to.
What
please
site
send
is
so
it
we
listed
can-
on?
It's on Airbnb.
Okay, I'm
Janice?
coming up with no
This is
exact
all right.
matches.
Beaver Drive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So at this point, we need to pick a date to talk. Brad, I will get to you. I promise you, I can't forget you. We need to pick a date for further discussion. And hopefully have an amended draft with essentially almost all of these being fleshed out.
Well, it's got enough time to edit it, send it back to the both planning commissions and get the next round of feedback, so probably
January.
at least a month.
December 11th,
Yeah, 2 months, December 11th, sounds good.
or sorry, December 10th. It's actually our meeting. I'll wait for her for a second, but that will be what we're gonna go for. Brett, you wanna?
Just semantics, are you considering waiving the breakfast requirement for bed and breakfast?
We were talking about, I mean, essentially, I guess.
Isn't that a positive enhancement?
Yeah, I mean, I don't wanna tattle on anybody, but I know, I'm not gonna tell on
That,
that.
yeah, don't.
It should have breakfast.
Just because they're doing it, again, that's a matter of enforcement. Just because they're doing it doesn't mean that they should be or.
But in this case, why the hell does anyone care in this example? I'm just saying,
It's a thing. Bed and breakfast is a thing.
right.
It's just a.
And this is a place where there's a lodging and right next door, there's a nice little cafe where they can go and get a sandwich. And should they not be allowed to do that because
Yeah.
people are up in arms over? I don't think so. So I'm not gonna tattle on anybody.
Who's gonna know?
Stony.
Well, it's a thing that it creates an environment of where you can
Just for right
sleep,
next door. That's what I
excuse
said.
me.
Yeah.
An environment where you can have a bed and you get up in the morning and you don't have to leave the house to, it's a concept and it works. It creates a charming little package.
Correct.
If you're gonna strip out the breakfast, then call it something else.
Well, this one says they have to provide breakfast.
Right, so they can take an order and they can go next door to the cafe and serve their guests.
That's what this says.
Right, okay.
My understanding is provide breakfast. Didn't have to be cooked there.
Yeah, correct. I mean, we gotta remember, we probably have more of the places in Smithfield that provide the breakfast than we do the beds. We want to support both of them and have a healthy business environment.
Yeah, all right.
So, okay, we're going to,
Before we get there,
hold on, we're not gonna have more of a discussion.
We have another hour of stuff to do.
one thing that I'd like to make a note on here, is from the Flower Commission, we had only one child. You should say, let's say, under 12, 2 child.
I don't know if you can limit what kids, can't do that. Can't say who can use it.
Well, what if a family comes and they have 2 children? I think the point is, we don't have one adult children there, big little children, it's a difference.
Who cares if you have an actual cap on the number of people? No, but what I'm saying is like, if you're like, if you have, 8 people or 10 people, 10 maximum guests, period.
Just put a maximum number of guests.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, but that's not the way planning.
Well,
commission has it.
correct, and I disagree with them on that point, and I think in this draft, we can reach compromise, because everything else, we seem to have a pretty firm idea. So I'm gonna say, Julia, we have time to re-advertise the ordinance itself if necessary. If not, great, but I figure we need to allot time, so
We need
I'm
time for
thinking
the-
December 10th. For the next hearing to actually vote on the amended draft. Or it could be the 19th.
We are
Not 19th,
required,
the-
No, 20,
The-
that's the 24.
yeah.
No, we moved it up. I guess it's probably the
Supervisors
17th.
For November and December are the second and third Tuesdays, because of Thanksgiving and the Christmas, Kwanzaa holidays.
Wait, what? They are?
Yes.
We did that way, no one had a meeting right before.
Okay, I'll look at it later.
We are required to provide the Monroe County Planning Commission 30 days to review an ordinance. If you continue the public hearing, until December 10th, we will be able to meet that timeline.
Okay.
Well, but it's gonna take a while to incorporate all the changes suggested too.
Yes, but much like Alex will be flying with the wind on data centers, I will take this.
You
one
already
to
started.
prioritize
All right.
this one. So we'll make sure that that's ready if you
Okay.
guys wanna
That's
talk.
gonna be December 10th and at 6, our regular meeting. So, can I hear a motion to close the public hearing, or recess the public hearing?
Jacob?
Yes.
If we're gonna vote on the next meeting, I really would like the
We
opportunity.
might not vote on the next meeting, we're gonna reopen the hearing.
We just, okay, so,
The ability to vote on it. We have the ability to vote on it right now, we're choosing not to, just so we're all clear. There's still an opportunity to provide input and insight.
Aren't you supposed to go back to the planning commission?
We will
We
do that, that's
just
what we
said
just
that we're
said,
going
so
to do that.
December 10th, so that both planning commissions can have an opportunity to re-review anything.
Right, so I'm going to ask for a motion to recess the hearing until then, and then if we really want
That's
to,
what
we
I'm
can,
just saying.
no, we're gonna take public comment at the proper time, which is after the motion is duly made and
Okay,
seconded.
all right, sorry.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Levinheim, do I hear a second?
Second.
Second, okay, now we can have that discussion, because it's about a separate issue. Go ahead.
thank you. Here's the point, if people are staying in a house and the owner's staying next door. They're not serving breakfast, but are you gonna remove the kitchens? So what will prevent the people staying in the house from using the kitchen? There's a 14-day maximum stay. It's a bed and breakfast, they're not providing breakfast. How are you gonna stop them from making their own breakfast? All of a sudden, that sounds a lot like an Airbnb.
That's right. That's exactly right. Most bed and breakfasts are only, you only stay 2 to 3 days.
But not only that, you can stay longer in a bed and breakfast, but the kitchen is off limits to the guests because the people who run the bed and breakfast are the people who are preparing the breakfast. Sometimes they'll make a bagged lunch, sometimes they provide dinner, oftentimes they provide dinner. I have 40 years of hospitality industry experience.
Great.
And oftentimes those extra meals in a bed and breakfast afford them another opportunity for revenue. So if they're staying there, the owner's next door, how do you know they're not just using?
We're gonna have to rely upon.
And how do you enforce that?
We're gonna have to rely upon, them making sure that they're in compliance with our rules and regs, which might mean in that case, you have to preclude access. I mean, we're talking about preventing this in existing structures already, so there's probably already methods that are employing to do that, but I'm not gonna send the zoning officer to make sure no one's cooking eggs.
Well, exactly. So it's an Airbnb now.
But it's not
It is
Airbnb
not
because
an
the owner's there and,
He's not there, he's next door.
right, exactly, he's
A
next
bed and
door.
breakfast,
I personally
not
don't
allow-
have any problem with an Airbnb if the owner's there. That's my feeling, because if it's my property and I don't have 160 signatures, but I've had many people say, why are you telling me what I can do with my property?
Mhm.
This is my property. I should be able to do what I want with it. How come Ken's showing up on my property saying I can't? I'm just telling
But
you.
here's us saying, why are you telling us what our neighbors, what we have to put up with from our neighbors?
And I'm saying.
They have to put up with you too, it's how. No, I did not mean that as a snide comment.
No, I didn't think you did, but.
I did not.
But again,
That's the purpose of, that is the purpose of zoning. And you'll also have people telling that I've said to my face, you guys shouldn't have any zoning. Why are you doing any of this stuff? Get out of my face.
Mhm.
Which some of your friends might say, they shouldn't do anything. Guess what? Then they can do whatever they want next
Right,
year.
yeah, that's
Right?
not the solution, absolutely.
Correct.
We're not saying that it is. But we just think that there are so many holes in this that.
Well, there's
Shouldn't
holes in
turn
it right
into a
now too.
free-for-all.
Go look at what you have right now. You got tons of holes.
Mhm.
So come with not just this sucks because of this, come with some constructive
Well,
options
we
too.
think we are. We
Okay,
think we
good.
have here. But that,
And if you go to the
Not
planning
property.
commission, which I know you do, then there you can provide very specific recommendations so that they can make their way.
But in the end, you make the decision.
Correct.
Planning commission don't make the decision.
No, I mean, for the very specific language that you want to have added so that it can help us add that language, or you can send it to Julia.
Our R1 zones are right now, Smithfield Village, Gabriel Estates are under siege in a way.
Absolutely.
They're being, I know people, two people, actually, that actually sold their house, left because of neighbors.
Yeah.
I could cry. I look at it, I think, I remember, it's just.
I'm
you
sorry,
know,
I'm trying to say we're trying to add some protections if you wanna.
Here in an R1 residential zone. And I'm telling the truth, I know people that live in fear in their houses.
If they're in fear, did they
Right
call
now.
the police? Do we need a regional police force?
Do you want a regional police force?
That'd be good.
Really?
You all wanna double taxes again to do that?
We have-
Or should we buy water gaps one cop?
you
We have
raise them
conditions
enough.
in Gabriel Estates and Smithfield Village that can be from the street, you can see. that
So
something
what I'll just say is,
going on.
so you have problems with how it is. You wanna have a no, you don't, you just wanna complain, okay.
Pardon me?
I'm trying to ask you a question, you're ignoring me,
I'm
I'm
not.
trying to
I'm
respond.
sitting right here.
Okay.
And I don't really appreciate being talked down to. I'm not talking down to you.
I feel like I'm being talked down too.
Huh?
Every time that you talk to me.
You seem to shut me down every time I want to say something, but let's proceed trying to accomplish something.
Right.
I'm gonna
I
call the
don't
vote.
live there, I don't live in the area, but I know people that live there, and I know the people that moved away not that long ago because of terrorism.
Okay, I'm gonna
And
call the vote.
nothing's been done.
I'm calling the vote. All in favor?
Done.
Aye. Okay. We are going to the consent agenda, which is the consideration to renew the service agreement with Kessler O'Brien Fire Protection, ratify the submission of the revised minimum municipal obligation to the Pennsylvania Municipal Retirement System, and set the trick or treating hours at 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. on October 31st, 2024. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Loveenheim. Do I hear a second?
I will second.
Second by Mr. Albert. Any questions?
Yeah, I have questions.
Okay.
Sorry, let me just get the.
No, you're fine.
The dates of trick or treating.
Yeah, what
I
day?
just said October 31st.
31st?
Yes.
You know East Stroudsburg's moved it because
I
the
know,
big, the
yeah,
big football match and all that stuff. Okay, just wanna make sure. I think it's correct,
Correct.
4 to 8.
yeah. Previous years, it was like 6 to 8, some years it was 4 to 7, I thought 4 to 8's inclusive. It doesn't really matter.
Well, I would say 4 is hard because some people aren't home.
Well, but what I'm saying, yeah, but like, I'm not gonna tell anyone to. They're allowed to, we don't even really have this authority, everyone just sets it.
No, but you know what? But people, I mean, my wife was like, make sure you find out what time trick or treating is.
It can start anytime.
But I'm a household, we have people that come to Shawnee.
Yes.
Want like to trick or treat, so if the township says it's 4, I'm gonna wanna make sure I'm there to give candy at 4, I'm just
Okay.
saying, that's a little bit early for me, I work till 5.
Okay. I don't care what time it's set at.
I'm sorry. Should we have a big discussion on what time trick or treating?
No, you can only trick or treat your adjacent neighbor.
Okay.
Put a bowl of candy out.
That's exactly what I do.
You'll come home, it'll be gone.
Get by the car.
Yeah, well, you carefully can't just leave your candy.
Discussions, and,
Yeah,
I don't think that there's too long of a time frame to have these discussions.
trick or
These are
treating?
important to us, you know,
That's
about,
important to me too.
you're being a little sarcastic
Yeah.
about
No.
the adjacent.
No, I know, it's just,
This stuff touches our lives.
Yeah, it touches
every day.
it touches my life too.
I know that.
Touches all of our lives, and we also, problem is, we're trying to get stuff done too. And I'm gonna tell you, I'm not one that wants nothing to change, because I also see the problems we have, and I think we can fix them and improve them. And I think we need to do that by making changes, and leaving it as the status quo doesn't necessarily do that.
Correct, but a lot of times here, things get done too quickly. It's a patch now and fix it later kind of mentality.
But we
and
don't have to
we
change the
don't want
data
that.
centers, and then you'll have one,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So you have to move it fast and maybe fix it later, or you just get a data center with none of the things you want,
Mhm.
right?
Well,
I'm just saying, there's a balance.
there is. a
Sorry, we're not talking about the hours right now. Can I make a motion that we change it to 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock?
All right, heard that motion, heard a second.
Wait, is that for the trick or treat?
Yes.
Why would you want to change it from 4 to 8? Why do you want to change it from 4 to 8 to 5 to 8?
Because then the parents have to be home at 4 to give out candy.
Or not.
But it's for the kids.
Right, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Al, you got one comment, then I'm voting.
Fine, 4 o'clock.
I think
I heard your motion
we
was
already,
seconded.
I'm from the school board, we already put it in our, emails out to the.
You put it out for East Stroudsburg, we're not East Stroudsburg.
Huh?
I saw a message that went out that said, yes, your trick or treating is now on the 30th. That's not for Smithfield Township, that's for East Stroudsburg
So
Borough.
are you doing it 30, are you doing it on the 30th?
31st, yeah,
Are you still doing it on the 31st?
correct.
Okay.
Now you go
Not a
to.
problem.
Yeah.
Mine's more just a question, does 4 o'clock they allow, sometimes they go to the businesses to trick or treat, and at 5 o'clock the businesses are closed.
Here's the reality.
Just asking.
People are gonna go on Facebook, they're gonna say, when does it start?
I recuse my motion, or pull my, not recuse, I take my motion back, 4 o'clock.
is gonna kill you.
Fine, I'll go
If you
do that.
want to go on Facebook and see, ESADA and think Smithfield is.
Yeah,
part of
that's why I
that.
was not very happy that the school district decided to do that without consulting.
Well, you mean the borough, I don't
No, the school
understand.
district did it. The school district sent out a
The
message
school district
today
sent the message, well, yes,
saying that Halloween
Yeah, but
has
we
changed.
put on our ESADA.
That was your decision for your borough.
Just saying that it's good that the parents are gonna be.
It's Halloween is the 31st.
I know, but if the school districts changed it and the borough.
the school, no, hold on, the school district didn't change anything. There was a football game on Halloween,
Yeah.
our Cavs did great, and we make no apologies for that. But some of us, yes, it will be purple. Some of us are celebrating Halloween still on the 31st because no one honestly cares what anyone thinks. People are gonna find a way to do
So
both.
people have kids in the school system.
Right, but people are gonna do both. I'm not going to the game.
I'm not either.
You know, but I want people that go there to be able to enjoy both. Some people think it's awesome, but you know what? Most of what I have no
Most
words.
high school kids don't go out trick or treating anyway.
Next month complaining that we had people out on the 30th coming to our house.
You know, there's a lot I could ask about the school board, but I'm not. So I gotta talk to you after, Debbie. Lot of concern. Okay, anyway,
A motion in a second.
okay.
What's the
Do
motion?
you withdraw your motion?
I withdraw I motion to go back to the original
'Cause
consent
that
agenda.
was honestly fine.
No, I motion to go back to the original consent agenda.
Alright, you don't need that, so he's withdrawn his motion. The motion to approve the consent agenda as stated has been moved and duly seconded, and we had comment, all in favor?
Alright,
Aye.
aye.
Next is the consideration to select engineering services for the Marshalls Falls Monroe County Redevelopment Authority demolition grant. Alex, we have two proposals.
That's correct.
We also have John, and we also have Brian Smith, who is still with us, God bless him.
Oh my gosh, Brian, good for you. Sticking around.
Good evening.
Okay, where do you wanna start, Alex? You took in both.
Yeah, we have two bids that the township received for the proposed demolition grant, and at this point, the board has received both of them after discussion several weeks ago. And there's been some revisions to one of them, the original one stands, and at this point, it's up to the board to deliberate on which to decide, and it's up to the board if they'd like to ask either of the proposed bidders questions, clarifications, or anything of that nature.
I mean, they both cost a relatively similar amount and have the same assumptions and safety bases. So it really depends on how many days. Not even sure how to really make a determination, but we needed more than one proposal, so.
Do we have recommendations from our staff?
Is there anything that you wanted to note, Alex? I mean, because the pricing is almost.
Pricing's almost the same. I would honestly, maybe Brian would like to say a few words.
Yes, Brian.
We're getting to this point, so I'd like to give Brian an opportunity to talk to the board a little bit about what's in their proposal and their qualifications and make their pitch for
Great.
consideration.
Brian, you can do that, and then
Sure.
we'll let.
Okay, can y'all hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so good evening, Jacob, Robert, and Michael. So I'm not sure if the board is all aware. Several years ago, we actually helped the township with the demolition of the 3 outbuildings at Marshalls Falls, and, assisted with that process. So that was the basis of our proposal that we submitted to the township for the demolition of the Titania house. So the work is really broken up into environmental services, which is really just pre-assessment of the structure to confirm if there's any asbestos that would need to be remediated separately when the project is demoed. That is required by DEP. And then following that, assessment would determine whether or not there needs to be special remediation done during demolition. We did contact the Conservation District, and they do require that there be an E&S plan prepared for this project. So we would, put that plan together and submit it to the county for approval. And then we'd obviously get to, at that point, being able to bid the project, and then oversee the demolition. Um, the project is pretty much set up as lump sum. The only thing that's really questionable is what the abatement observation will be, and that will really be dependent upon that initial assessment. And so once that assessment's done, we would be able to gauge, what we would anticipate the observation to be if there's any required at all.
Anyone have any questions for Brian? Speaking to the board? No. Okay. John, do you want to give a similar overview? I know they're functionally the same.
The only thing I have to say is ours is exactly the same.
All right.
How do you make a decision?
Right, because I've got one, which is T&M is 22,750 plus $2,000 a day. And I got Barry Isaac, which is 25,300 plus 2,400 a day.
I have a quarter.
Huh?
I have a quarter.
Yeah.
What do you do when two applications are functionally identical?
I mean, you pick the price.
This is a professional service, so you are not subject to any bidding requirements to choose the lowest bidder. You can go with whoever you choose and whoever you feel is best.
Well, I'd like to say something. Obviously, we have great relations with both firms. I started this project, I think, around 2016, and worked with Barry Isaac for several years on it through several grants. So we had a very good relationship, and they started this project as far as I can remember. And I think that John Tressler and his associates came in and did the last phase. What?
Barry Isaac has been our primary engineer for all things related to Marshall's Falls.
I see.
All right, motion to select Barry Isaac. The reason that they've been, I don't need a reason.
Okay. All right, I've got a motion from Mr. Albert. Select Barry Isaac. Do I hear a second?
Second, with no prejudice towards our engineer.
I'll add that, Brett.
Okay, motion by Mr. Albert and a second by Mr. Levenheim. Any questions?
Any discussion, any questions? Guys know what we're doing up here?
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is the consideration to approve beekeeping and parks form revisions. Alex, do you want to briefly give us an overview on that? I think you did a pretty thorough job.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So we actually got some language from your township solicitor upon request by the board with regards to volunteer activities on the parks and so on and so forth. What it reads is a release waiver indemnification agreements. And that language was so there's three documents before you. There's one that's just a general release waiver and indemnification for volunteers that do work on the parks. Volunteers in any municipality tend to be an important part of the community, but there needs to be some formality to the process in case an issue arises. Like, for example, there should be a primary contact cell, the email signature, and then also, when the volunteering activities were.
Are these two then the same? Because I think I have two.
These two are slightly different. The first is just for volunteers. So like, for example, for the bike park or disc golf. The other one is specifically for the beekeeping program that the board is considering. You may recall there was some press coverage recently, and we had discussed the possibility of members of the community signing up to have their own bees. And I met with Eric Beamer and spoke at length about some of his recommendations, and he was with the county beekeeping club, and also he has his own organization. And we went over 8 provisions that I think make sense for that. So basically, there's like 12 spots down at the waterfront house that a member of the public could utilize in order to have their own bees. The township wouldn't be, there's a number of provisions. I don't know if the board wants me to go through every one of them, but for example, the board would have to decide on a fee. I had proposed $100 security deposit and a one-time annual fee of $100 so that, you know, when the board and the township has
equipment.
yeah, equipment replacements, things like that. And also for, you know, anything that might arise and basically if that's what's before you, just something formal to have in place. If the board proceeds with the beekeeping one, then we can go on and start interviewing folks to see that they understand what they're getting themselves involved with, et cetera, et cetera. I hope I've explained myself clearly on those two documents.
No, that's good. I do think I literally have two dupes.
Yeah,
I
I just checked the packet that I sent out. I have the beekeeping form mislabeled and it's the general waiver. So the
Okay.
board is not seeing what is in front of you right now.
Okay.
Board, my apologies.
But I did, it was in the email though, so.
No one's keeping bees right now anyway, so can we just, I would like to see it before I vote on that, so can we leave that off? Is this waterfront house rental, is this for
That's a
for-profit? Oh, that's the next hearing, we're not doing that yet?
We can talk about that if you like. This is another proposition for a program that doesn't yet exist. We have been approached by two groups. One of them is a mommy and me exercise group. The other one is a trainer who would like to have a group of 8 to 10 people occasionally utilize the space. They are not 501c3 organizations. These are just individuals that are offering a service that might benefit members of the community. And so in preparation to do my due diligence, I met with the Boy Scouts and spent some time with them. And they were very courteous and went through all the items that must be taken care of if an individual were to utilize the house. And if the board were to move forward with that sort of program, this checklist would have to take place every time they come and go, so there's some accountability. And then the board had to set a use fee. Right now, there's like a $10 field use fee if somebody wants to use a field, something along those nature.
Right.
That nature, rather.
I'd love to have it so that nonprofits get priority if there's some question.
Yeah. I mean, I would entertain that motion to approve the parks forms with the exception of the beekeeping form, since I don't have that.
Yeah.
Do I hear that motion?
Oh, so moved.
Motion by Mr. Albert, do I hear a second? Second, Mr. Levenheim, questions?
I'm a little unclear about what we're approving.
We are approving the identification form for people that
Waiver
volunteer for the parks or do anything else with the township. And also approving a form that is the single day use checklist for the park house if people use it.
For business though.
This is
For either anyone that wants to use, so the Boy Scouts would have to start checking off.
Yeah, we haven't addressed the corporate use of the house at this point, but this is, do not use the fridge, keep the sink open, turn off all kitchen lights.
Right, but the two groups that are looking to use it, the mommy and me and the yoga, those are businesses.
Right, but we haven't yet
So-
approved any of those permits, and we're not going to until we make a determination on that. So what we are making determination is like people that use it right now, which literally I think is just the Boy Scouts.
It's just the Boy
The
Scouts.
motion on the table is for these two documents.
Got it, I thought the yoga and the mommy and me was included in that.
No, I was just saying that I would.
No, I would list that specifically,
Okay.
Park house, where is that?
right across the street.
Is that the one that Pam keeps talking about?
Yes,
Or what's she talking about? It's all here.
whether or not it's the house at Waterfront. I wanted to know where it was,
Oh,
and if it was the one that, you know, someone was
But
talking
is
about.
that the one that has issues also?
Yes,
that's the one that has a maximum of 20 people, or is that right?
I think it's like 11.
11.
It's safe enough to go?
For 11 people.
11 people.
Yeah, that's what the building codes officer says, so. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Next is the consideration to approve a custom import performance special event permit, which is essentially permitting food trucks occurring every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
That's a lot.
I know, but other places are already doing it, and I'd rather we get the notice.
Where is this?
This is up on 200 business. Custom import performance. They
It's in
are
the ED?
by, yes.
Well, they're already allowed to do that.
Well, so that's actually my belief, and I think that's where we're going to get into transient business type of stuff to make it
Okay.
easier, because I don't think we should do this every time. I would like them to just be able to do it and encourage that. I've already seen other places that don't have permits, but
Okay. Oh, that's the transient, that's the definition of transient, which is like a food truck.
right,
Right, and we're trying to that will be eventually a new ordinance.
That is actually, potential revisions are on discussion
Yeah.
at the end of this meeting.
Oh, it's on this meeting? Okay, great.
Yeah. All right, so I'll make that motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion by myself, second by Mr. Loveenheim. Any questions?
Everyone understands? Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm gonna entertain a motion to table item E, continuing our affiliation with BWA, because we still need correspondence to that effect. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to the table.
Motion by Mr. Loveenheim. Do I hear a second?
Sure.
Second, Mr. Albert. Question? All in favor? Aye. Lighting ordinance revisions.
Gosh, this could be a whole 4 hours, just this one, okay.
What is the gist of what you need from us tonight, Alex? I think we were mostly good as a result of the planning commission's revisions, and you've done a very, very admirable job with Scott and Eric Koopman getting it to this point where it's nearly done. So what?
Can I ask a question too? Have this that's in front of me, has it incorporated all of the planning commission
It
comments?
has. The planning commission discussed a number of things, including relief provisions. There was a lot of discussion on that.
Right.
So yeah,
Or
all
be
of
able to
the
grant
comments
that.
that we got from the planning commission, Robert was there as well. Robert made some recommendations, those were incorporated, so everything in here is what was post that meeting.
It gives the Board of Supervisors the ability to grant the relief, correct?
Yeah,
Right. This is-
Because that was specifically what we,
Does this effectively pull, because in the saldo only protects you against new construction, right?
Mhm.
But does it, in the zoning, does it protect us at all
this is zoning, like this.
in lighting? As if it's existing,
Every
is it-
existing
Well,
light.
this makes it part of general powers, so it's standalone and it's enforceable, just like nuisance ordinance or if someone were illegally.
it's in
parking
chapter
somewhere.
22 though? No? Oh, chapter 22 is not zoning.
Correct.
In accordance with the township code and
So
in
it's-
accordance with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it will be like referenced,
Mhm.
but this allows us to,
A new chapter 32, right, okay.
right,
Do that as well.
It gives us the right to get a BB gun, shoot the balls out.
No, remedy, we're gonna remedy, right?
I mean,
I know a few people that could do that.
I am, I will say just generally, I'm good with this, so we just really need to pick a date so it can be authorized to advertise, right? Because
I got a
on the
question, I got
planning
one question,
commissions.
it's relevant. A property that is partially in Delaware Water Gap and partially in Smithfield Township. How does it get governed by something like this? And I can think of a very specific property that has the worst lighting in the county.
Yes.
That I have already told them at a planning commission, we don't recommend them expanding until they fix the lighting.
Is that the most, yeah?
It's across from the Marts. They have horrible lighting. It's completely bleeding. Yeah.
Yeah,
Need storage facility?
yeah, no, so they went through land development, they went
It's not-
through land development approval here, so I would suggest
Yeah.
that whomever has the land development jurisdiction in that case would then have enforcement.
Isn't it what we call the castle principle?
Well,
No,
they have to do
because-
both.
no,
They have to go
because
through both, right?
I mean,
Julie, do you know?
theoretically have,
The property just changed hands.
I would actually, I would defer that to John, because I believe you worked on that. When we went through the land development process for move-in self-storage, they were required to submit both to us and the other township, right?
That is correct.
And they were required to conform with both of our standards that were active at the time, correct?
Okay. So is Delaware Water Gap gonna know that then?
They were.
Sort of
Tim?
eyeing you. So,
I thought you were talking about the wellness center, because that's lit up real bright too.
yeah, no, I'm talking about across from Marts.
Yeah,
That place is,
yeah, that's always been known though.
yeah, I know, but it's still terrible and it's, yeah.
I'm sure they had to submit a lighting plan for their land development. and-
They did, but it's not compliance. Yeah.
Well,
well, if it's not in compliance with the approved plan, then that's a
you
different
got
case,
teeth
that's,
then.
yeah, that's not a,
Alright.
that's different
Well,
than
what
this.
I'm asking for this, because that's an
That
enforcement
is a
issue.
zoning,
But
issue.
my question is this enforceable If it's on a split property, and it sounds like it is, that's all I want. Okay.
It should be. So for the board, likely what we'd be looking for is send this to the county planning commission for formal review, then send it to the township planning commission for formal review at minimum, and then consider the possibility of setting a hearing.
Has the engineer reviewed it?
The engineer has reviewed it. We went over that in the planning commission at length. There was a lot of excellent feedback.
So we're at like the 95% line here, right?
I would say so. I
Alright.
definitely want to get.
I'll entertain a motion to request the planning commission formally review the draft lighting ordinance. Second. I don't consider that my motion, and a second by Mr. Levenheim. Questions? All in favor? Aye. Okay, potential transient business ordinance revisions. I don't know if we have anything in the packet that is. Oh,
Is this-
yes, we do.
Yes.
What we have is, I guess, essentially a further defining it, right? Julia, did you write this or no?
This one was me.
Okay.
Robert had actually brought it to our attention that
It's
back
very last.
when the board made updates to the transient retail business, we changed things in chapter 27, which was zoning, but not in chapter 15, which is separate transient business.
So we're just making this comply with the zoning that we already set?
That is the concept. There is a desiring, or within this ordinance update, there's also a permit application. So you can review, under section 3, we've got just one item, A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Take a look at it. Make considerations, think about it, things that we want to add. And we can move forward when we're ready to move forward. I see this one being put on the back burner if we're going to,
This one is chapter 13, so we don't need planning commission reviews, right? So we don't have to
that is.
utilize,
correct.
we don't have to use that
I
deadline system.
don't believe. Yeah, this is only updates to chapter 13. There are no updates to the, chapter 27.
Well,
Right.
this is one of the things I think I mentioned this to you once before, Julia. I know it's really hard. I'd really like to see like what parts got changed. I know the way ordinances, it's hard to do that because I could completely remove this entire section and then completely add this section.
Right.
But, in reality, it's like, well, words got
Yeah,
edited.
I can absolutely manually redline this and bring it back. No problem.
That would be good, because then at that point, we can.
And it helps with people that are like, well, this is crazy. It's like, actually, it's all exactly the same. There's just 4 words that got changed, so people can feel more comfortable that we're not doing something crazy.
Right, it's great, it talks about, this currently refers to chapter 27. Dealing with the lighting of the lot that it would be in, but by the time this actually will be adopted,
Ugh.
chapter 20, what I'm saying is chapter 27 will actually refer to chapter 22 for lighting, correct?
Yes.
So then
Alex
that would be changed anyway.
Alex will change all of those as the lighting.
The only thing I want to say just generally is written consent of the property owner shall be submitted with the permit application. I do not want a permit every time someone wants to do this. It doesn't make sense. I haven't seen anyone comply with it because they really can't. I've seen it at Country Kettle, seen it at St. Luke's. I have seen it in a number of places in the township. So I'm all about an annual permit if that's it, but I don't want permits for unique operation.
But also, isn't this where it's like, okay, and some of these permits we're getting are for a use that is allowed by right in the area, but because it's transient.
Well, correct. So I don't like the idea of punishing them just because they have a different method of doing
I
business.
think we were talking about a yearly permit here, weren't we?
Well, my question is just this, if you're by right in ED allowed to have a restaurant, yes?
Yes.
By right. If I own land and then I bring a food truck onto it, which is a restaurant.
No, all right.
Okay.
It's not brick and mortar.
So a restaurant defined as brick and mortar, that's the restaurant was a bad example, I'm sorry, let me think of,
Okay, you want a beer store.
A mobile
You wanna open
dog grooming station, perhaps. I think the concept of having written consent of the property owner is simply.
No, I'm not talking about that one
Oh,
point. I'm just trying to understand the entirety.
Talking
of
about
the
having
ordinance.
permits for things that are by right anyway. Like
Right,
a permit on top of your permission to do it.
right.
Is that correct?
Well, I think the only reason, let's say, to regulate this is just to make sure that, let's say it's a food truck. If there's a driveway entrance, that's a real driveway, it's not just a field that somebody has
Right.
put up, you know.
I totally understand how it makes sense. I just want to make sure our ordinances make sense with it.
Can we put in a rider into this that makes that distinction? Because I see this going two ways. A food truck is something that, you know, is gonna travel throughout. When we're contemplating transient businesses in general, though, we are not contemplating a local food truck. We are contemplating someone like, let's say Pocono Soap is like, oh, it's a fantastic day. We would like to go sell our winter themed soap and other products, you know, on an existing parcel with, you know, say minimal improvements or something. And they're not in a truck. They literally just want to set up in a tent. Like, this is what it says.
Well, that's why an annual permit makes sense. But what about flea markets? Are we protected from?
Well, we already have a definition of farmer's market. So I don't think.
Which is different from flea market. I think
Yeah.
that was
We do
changed a
have the
few years ago.
definition for
Yes.
flea market, yes.
So this is just really, a transient business, I don't know, in a truck.
It's gotta be on wheels, or I guess it doesn't.
No, it does not, because it
Like a
says,
spirit store?
A
Would
what?
that be a spirit store? The costume stores that pop up
oh,
this
I
time
see.
of year? Would
Well,
that be
they're
an
they're
example or
brick and
no?
mortar.
No,
So
I
they're
mean,
just a
that is
short-term
correct.
lease,
right,
Okay.
or not a short-term lease. They're like usually 1 to 3 days, right? They're usually like a 60
Right.
lease.
right.
And one of the reasons we thought this would work is not just the food trucks, but for instance, Christmas markets, anything like that pops up, it's gonna be there for a while.
Christmas tree farm, like,
Well,
Yeah.
or Christmas ornaments or, you know, Christmas market, whatever it happens to be.
okay, all right.
And also, I think it would enhance the businesses we have along our major roads, which is especially like, Seven Bridges Road and so forth.
Well, I mean, we're allowing a permit as long as we know. I said this before, we talked about something else. We were talking about, signage and
Yeah.
and permits. We have to know what we're gonna deny the permit for,
Right.
right? You know, I think we have to make sure this is very clear what is not allowed.
Good question. But I think part of it is just going back to our definitions in other words and saying, okay, we know it's not a farmer's market. We know it's not a flea market because they're covered other places. So,
But will they have, I mean, what I'm saying is if they wanna. Can't think of a negative example, but something we definitely don't want, but they meet all the criteria, you have to approve the permit, right?
well.
Well, I think that, like, I mean, this is a really bad
What
example.
we
So
don't have
let's say
somebody
like,
selling rugs.
well, I don't know how you make that distinction.
They're
I
like
think,
sub rugs.
I think what you can say is like, you don't want people that like, let's pretend, you know, someone owns an industrial, you know, factory that makes flavors and scents. We certainly don't want people selling combustible, you know, material. to make
Fireworks
things,
inside the store, we
you know.
can't cover that anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that, I don't mean that, but I mean like, you wanna prevent things that are obviously dangerous, but are not necessarily, you know. You can't make a distinction between like carpets and ornaments, like, you know, cause that carpet person is gonna destroy you in litigation. But I think if we can make the distinction between the mobile businesses versus something that's set up with an actual structure that is not mobile, I think there's a difference there.
Yeah, and a tent would be mobile too, so it's definitely something bigger than that, right?
I guess it could be your square footage. I mean, like this
You could
talks
say
about the
it's,
signage, how it's specific to that type of use, like
We could say a tent of certain dimensions.
yeah,
That's all.
yeah, we'll discuss this in the.
All right, motion, well,
We don't
motion to have Julia redline it, or you're just gonna do that?
I
She could
will
just do-
manually redline that, that's no problem.
Yeah.
Okay, motion to table? I'll stop, it's just discussion, I don't need to, all right.
It's fine, there's motion by Mr. Albert, and a second by Mr. Loveenheim.
Sure.
All in favor, or any questions, sir? Aye. Okay, public comment.
I understand that. I don't think 2.5 hours twice a month is a whole lot of time to discuss these important issues in our lives. This is 2 opportunities that we have every month to gather together and discuss the planning, the development, the governance of our township. And I think oftentimes as a group, we are met with resistance from you guys that we're taking too much time, or I understand that there's a fine line between constructive conversation and going overboard, but I don't think 5 or 6 hours a month is a whole lot of time
It's not enough
to
time.
ask for. Very true.
That's the problem.
I agree
The
with
problem
that.
is the time between.
But, so as we're going through the agenda each week, and it would be nice to feel like we're actually being heard and not rushed through the agenda. It's an issue with us, with feeling disrespected, and somebody used the word disenfranchised. And oftentimes the attitude of the board and sometimes the staff is condescending and demeaning and just makes us feel like we're wasting our time. So I would request a little more respect from the board and the township towards the residents.
Now,
So I want to come up here so everybody can hear me. Good evening, everybody, supervisors, council, engineer, members of the public. My name is Hal Harris. I am the president of the Rotary Club of the Greater Poconos. Formerly the Rotary Club of Mount Pocono. We changed our name and our location. We're now located at 6967 Bridge Road. In the Greater Poconos, we actually received our charter. We changed our name with the state. So we widen our scope. I had a brief conversation with Jacob because we're looking to apply for LSA grant. And he said that that's something that the board, that this body does not really do, I guess.
hold on, but let me just be clear. I said I would have to recuse myself from that discussion because I cannot touch it. You can request it of others, but I can't be involved. I want that clear.
Okay, he did say if it came, he would recuse himself. But my understanding is sometimes the townships don't want to get involved in submitting the applications. What happens with you, if they submit the application, we avoid the fee that the county charges, which is $500. The township would be entitled to a 2% administration fee, since ours would be an acquisition grant. It's a pretty easy fee to earn. You get the property, you write the check when the closing happens, you get the equipment, you write the check when we submit the invoices for the equipment. But nonetheless, Jacob made a very good suggestion. He says they have the experience, EDC, the county EDC. So we're gonna find $500 and we'll work through the county EDC at this point. However, I did want to make the township aware of what we're doing. We have a couple of programs that we have, normally we've done our, on a regular basis, for 26 years, we've done our flying, driving breakfast, pancake breakfast up in Topiana. We raise money, and the organization, our Rotary Club, had in the past written checks to Salvation Army, Meals on Wheels, Special Olympics. Well, when I was elected president and I went through our training, they said Rotary is not a check writing organization. We are supposed to be a boots on the ground service organization. So our club decided through our strategic planning that we're going to do some real programs. One of which is going to be our Rotary Community Hub up the street. We're making it available to nonprofits, to community meet, to recovery groups, whatever the case is, at low or no cost. We also are using it as an incubation hub for small businesses, so they can have a virtual space, a desk space, or an office space to use to help grow the economic development. We have been approved by IRS to be a VITA site. We are actually a community partner with IRS. We have our site identification number, we have our EIN number, and we've begun recruiting volunteers. What is VITA? It's the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, and it provides free income tax preparation, federal, state, and now local also, for residents and taxpayers who earn under $67,000. So that's low and moderate income taxpayers, that's disabled persons, that's veterans, military, elderly persons, and low and moderate income people. Currently, based on our research, there's 30,000 people in Monroe County qualified for that service. It brings them the tax credits, child tax credits, earned income tax credits, rental rebates, real estate rebates, and a whole plethora of money that a lot of times gets left on the table. What does it do for the local community? It brings that money into the local community, quite frankly, so that they can shop at our stores, so that they can buy our goods, so they can catch up on their rent payments and things of that nature. So what will we be requesting in that? I was reading a little something that y'all do a little grants. We have to pay for paper, ink, which you know is, y'all put out a lot, so you know it's not cheap. So we be coming to you for a small grant, requests from the township, somewhere in between $1,500 and $2,000 or whatever the case is, to help out. Every dollar that you do, IRS ultimately matches. So you get the biggest bang for your buck with that. We'd also be applying for a Rotary Global Grant, which they would also match, the funds. It is a great way to reach a lot of people, in our township. Then we also have our Rotary Saturday Institute. I invite you all to come visit our facility. With our Rotary Saturday Institute, we'll be teaching two groups. One is youth from 16 to 18 still in high school. The second group is young adults 18 to 22 out of high school, and we teach them the FAITH program. Financial literacy, addiction prevention, introduction to occupations, technology connections, and healthy living. I like to use acronyms so I can remember things over here, John. With the introduction, the financial literacy, they learn about banking, credit, how to use it, not abuse it, how it can be an effective tool. They learn how to put together a 5-year budget, and a 5-year goal plan, and a personal budget. During the addiction prevention, they learn about staying away from drugs, alcohol, tobacco, and gambling. In the Tech Connect, they learn about the differences between the Macs and the Windows, and 3 different programs: Office 365, Adobe, and then the Google Suite programs. In the Tech Connect, and then in the Health and Living, we actually have a licensed nutritionist come in, teach them about how to eat healthy. We have somebody who comes in and teaches them about healthy drinks, and then we have a professional professional trainer who comes in and gives them a simple daily plan that they can utilize to stay healthy without having to subscribe to a gym. Overall, we're now boots on the ground. Instead of doing a feel-good program, we're gonna have real good programs that actually are quantifiable and have measurable results that impact positively our entire community. We need the community support. So we have one fundraiser now. We have this, it's called Bingo and Booze. We actually have a special occasion license. So it's Thursday tomorrow night, and then once a month we'll do this. And we're just asking for the support. We're gonna let you know that we're here. If there's any way that we can be of a bigger resource, great. To the extent that the township would like us to bring the tax prep services here, if you have a handicap accessible room, we'll work out one Saturday a month or one weekday a month where we can actually be on site in order to be here, because we're on the second floor now, so until we acquire the building, we won't have handicap accessibility. When we do, we will. The last thing I would ask for is that y'all support our LSA grant. We've got the grant application together. I'm happy to make it available. We have it in draft format now, whatever the case is. So, and we want to let you know we're a community partner. We're here to work with everybody, and if there's any way that we can help, that's what we're here to do. Any questions? I'm open for any questions.
Thanks for me. Send that to Julia and consider.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Good. Which building are you now in?
We're in 6967 Bridge Road. If you're driving, the Shirley Katz building, where Rosemary Brown used to have all.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In there, we're in that.
But where, so how do you, because I know there's the Rotary of the Smithfields.
Okay.
Just trying to understand how, I mean, there's a board member Rotary of the Stroudsburgs for many years, and I'm still technically a rotary member, I haven't been to a meeting in a while. Just trying to understand. Sorry?
We still like.
Yeah, sure. I still pay my dues, that's why.
Actually, we don't make much from your dues, I think.
No, I know, how do you
everybody
work
makes
with, how do you work with the Smithfield, just because to understand, I mean, like, there's jurisdictions.
We're not in competition. None of the Rotary clubs are in competition. Rotary was formed in 1905 and has 36,000 Rotary clubs
Yes,
worldwide. We work in tandem with one another, not against each other.
okay.
The Rotary Club is in Smithfield, and I believe, Stroudsburg, remember Stroudsburg? So we have the Stroudsburg, we have the Smithfields.
The chair of our planning commission is on the Smithfield.
Okay, when the Smithfield, like when the tractor supply company opened up, they called me. I called out to the Smithfields, we put up a tent, I went and traveled for 45 minutes and got the Rotary balloon, and we passed out their stuff. We work together. We came down here because we believe that it's more accessible to a lot of the things that we're looking to do, quite frankly, and to grow. So
I just want to understand.
we work in tandem. We don't work against one another. All right, and we'll have some collaborative projects open.
And just so you know, I mean, I've said this before, technically, we cannot act on anything that is not on the agenda that comes up in open forum. So we can't actually act on anything. So you have to submit something that could then be placed on the agenda.
Okay.
We can hear you, we can talk, but we can't.
Right now, it's informative, and it's just, thank Jacob. Jacob suggested that I go to EDC. I'm glad that you made the suggestion. I've been working with Michelle or whatever the case is.
Yeah,
We just want to find.
for an LSA, that's probably better.
All right, we just want to find a way forward and let you know that we're here in the community.
Where are you looking at acquiring?
What's that? That we're not gonna release just yet.
Oh, yeah.
That we're not gonna release. Likely our building that we're in, we do have an option to purchase the building. But we've seen some other sites
Is
also
the
that.
deadline, is it November 1st or is it
November
November 30th? Okay, so we have enough time to
We
vote
have
on that at
time.
a future
All
meeting.
right, so I don't wanna put it out there and.
No, I get that, but
Because
you'll give us,
nonprofits can't submit for LSAs.
correct, they're not direct,
LSAs have to be submitted through eligible entities, economic development, municipalities, county governments, council of governments and things of that nature. All right.
Gotcha.
Kyle, if you wouldn't mind, directly underneath where you're standing is a small, thing with business cards.
Okay.
Grab mine and get in contact with me regarding your requests for support and the letter of support for the LSA grant.
Okay.
And we'll make sure we get it on the agenda.
I do appreciate it. Okay, thank you so much. And let me say, thank you so much. I know y'all go through a lot. I've been on the council before. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Quick question,
Yeah, any
how do we find your groups, specifically, like, do you have your
I'll give you the
website
address.
page or?
you wanna leave the flyer with us too?
Yeah, I'll leave some of the flyers.
Yeah.
Be official records, I guess. We're at 6967 Bridge Road, but our website address is
Yeah.
rotarygp.org.
Greater Pocono, got it.
Right, and we're down, you'll see our sign, we had to wait for the name change and all of the approvals, and by the way, to speak to you, Michael, we went through district, we went through zone, and we went through Rotary International in order to get everything approved. Our charter was issued a few days.
You seem super engaged and are you more engaged than some other Rotaries, but so good for you for being such active.
Well, we're working on it, and hopefully, if everything works out right, we'll actually be pulling a global grant from Rotary International that will actually impact this community.
For your VITA stuff, you could reach out to United Way too. I mean, they do it as well, but they support VITA.
Okay, we've already reached out to United Way. They have not told us, their volunteers or IRS, whether they'll be doing it this year.
Okay.
And IRS is poised to hand over all of their fines from last year to us.
Okay, cool.
So nobody falls through the cap, through the caps.
Thank you. Any other?
What's your name again?
Julia.
Julia, okay.
Are you all gonna have, budget working sessions?
That was the other thing I wanted to announce. Julia, you have the correct timeline. We're going to have a presentation on the budget that our staff has prepared on November 12th, which is our first regular meeting in November. And then we will be prepared to adopt it by our second meeting in December, which is December 17th, because it has to be advertised for 20 days. So we'll be able to meet that timeline. What the intent in the presentation is our finance director and township manager will be presenting the budget for everyone in the presentation format, which will also go on the website. And then the board will make some decisions on the discretionary items because 90% of it is by default, you know, it's utilities and trash, that type of stuff. And then where we have discretion over capital improvements and personnel is where we'll make those decisions. So they're going to identify the areas they need that input, and then we will pass a balanced budget with no tax change.
What time is it?
6 during our regular meeting.
On the 12th.
Yes. So that's the plan.
With the rollout of the updated sign, light and noise ordinance, may I suggest that potentially you have a user portal for registered users on the site where you can recommend residents can submit media in certain approved file formats and certain media tools, so they can report infractions. They would enforce your new ordinances.
We're actually in the process of creating that. I believe it was maybe 2 meetings ago at this point, we had mentioned that we were shifting over to Laserfiche. We're having some issues with our former provider getting our documents back. So we're working through that right now. But one of the reasons we went with Laserfiche is because we will be able to have something on our website that says, hey, submit a complaint here. And you'll be able to fill out the complaint right on the website, upload your pictures. We're going to be able to do the same thing with zoning, where if you want to submit a permit for a shed, you can submit your drawings, you can submit, you know, hey, yes, I've paid the sewer authority, here's this piece of information, here's pictures you need. And we'll be able to do that. It's going to take us a few months to build out the system, but we are moving as quickly as we can with that.
That's great.
Excellent, thank you.
That's great, yeah.
I'm very excited
I'm
and I
excited.
cannot wait for the pathways.
Yeah.
Laserfiche is a wonderful tool and it will eliminate a lot of the day-to-day low, simple administrative tasks to really enable Ken and Diana both to focus on doing more enforcement and getting more work done, because they won't be the ones going, hey, we're gonna fill out the person's name and the address on the permit anymore. Laserfiche will do that for us.
Excellent. Thank you.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. 11:09.
Well, the time of the
Second.
I will second. I think it's another comment.
Was there?
Yeah.
No, I was just saying I want to go home too. I'm just
Okay.
seconding.
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn at 8:47.